Welcome to the June 13th, 2023 City Council work session. I'd like to turn it over to City Manager Winter Benda to walk us through the agenda overview.
I'd like to amend the agenda to discuss, and I'll make that as a motion, to discuss a procedure for appointing candidates to the Lynchburg City School Board for just this specific term of appointments that we're getting ready to make. And I'd like to place that at the end of the work session agenda, prior to roll call.
At the end of the work session agenda?
Prior to roll call.
Prior to roll call. Okay.
Would be to discuss a procedure. It doesn't necessarily have to be this procedure, but to make sure we lock down a procedure to get that done before the end of this work session.
Any discussion on the motion? Or do we have a consensus to agree to discuss procedure?
Fine. Have at it.
You okay with that, Chris? Vice Mayor?
It's been a motion and a second, so it is. We either got to withdraw the motion or you vote on the motion, so. If it's by consensus, you can withdraw or vote on it.
We're fine? Okay, go ahead and vote to add, we'll just do a consensus vote to add it to the
I
work
think if
session.
everyone's on the same page, you can add it.
Okay, so we'll make it item number 8 on the work session.
Okay.
All right, discussion for school board. Okay, Mr. Benda, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council. Happy Tuesday. Good afternoon. Today we have some guests with us. We have Amy Carrier, who is CEO of Central Health, and her board chair, George Zippel. They're with us, and they're going to engage you about Central Health's improvement plan. That's $500 million, and how exciting that is for our city. We also then have Donna Witt, our Chief Financial Officer, who is going to follow up with you about our CIP, our Capital Improvement Plan. And in the weeks in between our last meeting and here, I met with each of you, got to discuss with you your feedback, your input about the CIP, things that you were interested in, sent you a resource that hopefully you've received, and since we've shared it with the public. So Donna will do that. And then we have what our business item briefings, and what that means is we try to engage you ahead of time where at a pending or impending meeting, there's a vote. And so what we do is we try to make sure we engage you up front, make you understand the substance of what's being talked about. And 2 of these, just for today, again, we have more guests. Dunbar Middle School Heating Renovations Public-Private Education Act. We'll have Dr. Reed Wodica here with us to discuss that. And then also there's been a request to amend the Lynchburg City Schools major classification funding for FY 2024, and either Dr. Wodica or Dr. Crystal Edwards, who's our superintendent, will be here to discuss that. There was information that was sent. Mr. Bischens had asked some follow-up questions. Dr. Edwards got that information today and was shared with each of you. So just want to highlight that different from the business item briefings that are usually city staff specific, today we're going to have some our friends and partners one street over come in and kind of talk about 2 of the business item briefings. And with that, Madam Mayor, turn it back to you.
Thank you so much. Now we will discuss the Centra Health Improvement Plan. Ms. Amy Carrier, Mr. George Zippel from Centra Health.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I do have a presentation to share with you all today. I just want to say how much I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and tell you a little bit more about our modernization plan. The modernization plan is really connected to our strategic plan, which was led by our board. And as you mentioned, George Zippel was here with us today as the chair of our board. We also have John Fees, who's a member of our board, who's here with us as well. And I just want to thank my team from marketing, communications, and facilities planning, who are also here. I believe you'll get to hear from them a little bit more this evening in council when they talk a little bit about our zoning proposal. And so I do have a presentation. There we go. So this is a Spark presentation. We have an amazing graphics designer who does our work for Centra. I'm very proud of their work in putting this together. The modernization plan, as I mentioned, is connected to our strategic planning process, and the strategic plan, the backbone of that is our community health needs assessment. The community health needs assessment is how we lift up the voice of our community in identifying what our priorities should be for meeting the health needs of the community. And when you think about our strategic plan, the first thing you might think of is our mission and vision. And I hope that all of you had access to the one-page document that we shared just as a read ahead or information for you that outlines the components of our strategic plan. And so if you think about Centra's mission and vision, as part of this planning process, we defined our mission as to improve the health and quality of life for the communities we serve. And you'll note that it does say communities, not community, because we cover, over 9,000 square miles of geography and over 500,000 lives in our service area. And so the modernization plan is really the first phase of our modernization plan that focuses on the Lynchburg region as part of the communities that we serve. Those communities are very different and all have different needs, which is also reflected in the community health needs assessment. We have 3 of those assessments, one for Bedford, one for the Farmville community, and one for the Lynchburg region. So what we're talking about today, obviously, is the Lynchburg region. Our vision at Centra, which spans the length of the strategic plan, that's really a 3 to 5 year long-term plan, is to pursue excellence, inspire hope, and to advance health and healing in our communities. So why modernization? I mentioned the community health needs assessment, and out of that community health needs assessment, you also had a one-pager that was shared with you in advance. Every 3 years, we are required as part of our triennial accreditation to perform the community health needs assessment and to establish those priorities, and then to develop a 3-year implementation plan that's focused on advancing work in those areas of priority. So what you see here are the 4 areas that we've focused on for the Lynchburg region together with many of our community partners. The first is access to healthcare services, the second, mental health, and access to healthcare, mental health care, substance use and abuse. The third area are issues impacting children and child welfare, as well as the fourth area, which is addressing chronic disease, which we know is important as we look at an aging population in the communities that we serve. So as part of our community health needs assessment, we have a priority that is related to modernizing our care. And modernizing our care really looks at care across the continuum. It's not just about acute care, it's about value-based care. How can we help our population to stay healthier at home and not in our emergency departments that I know you all know are very busy, or in our hospital? And so the first piece of this really talks about those services that we will provide through a central command center in a building that already exists on our campus. It's the Centra IT building. And this building will house the command center that will focus on innovative concepts like value-based care, remote patient monitoring. We just started our remote patient monitoring in the community. We have 100 devices that we're able to deploy in the community to monitor patients who have conditions like high blood pressure and heart failure or diabetes, and be able, through our nursing team, to monitor them remotely, connect them with a provider when they go outside of a normal range, and intervene with medication or other services to keep them healthier and not have to go back into the hospital. So we launched that work in March. That's part of this new Central Command Center. In addition to that, we're getting ready to open our centralized telemetry services. We have centralized monitoring services for patients who are in the hospital. So virtual sitters who are looking at screens, monitoring patients, communicating with them about their needs, if they need to get out of bed, how to do so safely, or connect them with someone who can help them. And then there are other services that we will be providing, like virtual nursing services. You might remember back at the beginning of the pandemic, we had services where you could call a nurse if you were unsure about where to go for your condition. That's something that we'll be putting back into play with virtual nursing that will allow patients to call and either to be connected with a medical home or directed to urgent care, or if needed, to go to the emergency department or call 911. But it will really help us to serve our community so that they know where to go for what care they need when. We will have 24/7 access to care and support through that facility. In addition, we are proposing a new medical office building. This medical office building will be a Class A building, very similar to what you see at the Pearson Cancer Center or with Strubant's and the Heart and Vascular Institute. This will bring together services that make sense to bring them around a patient, particularly comprehensive services for brain and spine, that right now a lot of our community members have to go to neurology here and neurosurgery there and therapy over here and imaging there. So very similar to what we've done in creating a space that's easier for patients to navigate with cancer and cardiac services, we'll be doing the same with our brain and spine. So this new medical office building is, in fact, the office building that's being proposed and part of the zoning. I know that we'll be able to discuss in detail this evening. It will be located, if approved, on Langhorne Road, on the former Holy Cross High School site. And it will house, as I mentioned, brain and spine and many other multi-specialty services, surgical services, imaging services, and so forth. The one nice thing about this proposed medical office building is that by bringing those services across the street from the hospital campus, we'll be able to decompress that campus a little bit by adding some parking and some other services that have been needed for quite some time, and be able to create an environment that our patients can navigate a lot easier than trying to go for outpatient services on a busy hospital campus and trying to find your way to a doctor or a diagnostic or outpatient service. So that is part of the benefit of the medical office building. Now, just because we're looking across the continuum, it doesn't mean that we're not also addressing the needs that we have at Lynchburg General Hospital, mainly the emergency department, which was built in the 1980s as an interim emergency department and is much smaller than what we need to serve our community. The current emergency department has 50 treatment bays. It was not designed like a modern emergency department would be designed, with a split flow design that allows us to move fast-track patients who can be quickly diagnosed, treated, and able to go home, versus patients that need to go into a room for more extensive diagnostics and physician services prior to perhaps admission. So it will certainly help through design to enhance our patients and their families' experience of care in the emergency department. One of the things that we'll also be able to include in this emergency department is an integrated empath unit. You might have heard us talking about the empath unit that's a modular unit that was built and is attached now to our existing emergency department. That unit is intended for behavioral health patients who would otherwise be in the emergency department but do not have medical conditions. These are not violent or ECO or TDO patients, but they're really just patients who are waiting to start treatment. But because of the lack of capacity or the challenges with patient placement, a lot of times those patients wait under 24/7 fluorescent light in a room that's a behavioral health safe room, deprived of their belongings, on a stretcher that's very uncomfortable for a long time. This empath unit allows us to progress those patients, and it's a Joint Commission best practice that has shown up to 60% of the patients that go into an empath unit and are in this group therapy environment norm and are able to be discharged directly from the empath unit and directly from the ED, which means we'll open up more capacity in our inpatient behavioral health unit for those patients who really need to be in a longer term stay for behavioral health. And so the new ED will be significantly larger at 63,200 square feet, with many more treatment areas designed for modern care and modern safety. Many of the things that you might have heard about some of the challenges in post-COVID are conditions with anxiety and depression and drug and alcohol abuse, which have led to significant concerns around workplace violence. And so by building these modern facilities, we can also incorporate the visibility and the safety features that will help us to keep our caregivers safe while they're taking care of their patients. In addition to the emergency department in this tower, the emergency department is on the lower level. This tower will be a 5-story tower, and it will have the capacity to include 93 additional beds. Some of those beds would not be built out immediately, but we would have the space available so that as we start to look at where we need to modernize in other towers in the Lynchburg General Hospital campus, we would have some flexibility in moving things to be able to update facilities to provide modern care across the entire campus. One of the things we just shared with the community is that we are, in fact, designing new mother, baby, and birth center services as part of that tower. And so by designing that, it's not that we're just moving services from one tower to another, but really looking at what modern care means to modern families. And how do we house mothers and babies together? How do we care for them in NICUs that are designed with the amount of square feet and the services that modern facilities have for babies with special needs? So we are designing that facility to meet those needs, and also the proximity to the emergency department will allow us to have an OB emergency department as well, and those triage services for mothers and families who go into labor earlier than expected. So we're really excited about the synergy in the tower. Now, you might be saying, you're building a new tower and parking is already a challenge on that campus. And so we looked at many different options for parking. Initially, we looked at a piece of property that is much closer to the Hillsdale community. And we asked that community if they would support us converting that into parking and creating, low lighting and things that would not diminish or impact the community. They were not supportive of that, and we understand that. So our plan is not to develop anything on that site or to ask for any rezoning of that site. One alternative was to build a massive parking deck. I will tell you, I'm not a fan of parking decks because parking decks, they're unsightly and they're expensive. And I would much rather see our system put our precious dollars into patient care than into bricks and mortar for parking decks. So when the land became available at the former Holy Cross campus, that gave us an opportunity to say, could we expand and relocate some of these services and then create parking that would enable us to build this tower and to create a campus that's much easier to navigate for our patients and their families. So some of these parking projects have already started, and I know this is a bit of an eye chart if you're looking from way back there. So I will point out, if you see those two beige pieces to the left and then Catacorner, that's Tate Springs Road and Thompson Drive. And those are two locations that we have already started enabling projects to expand parking. As you look at the blue site that's labeled there, that's where the current Tate Springs Medical Center is. That building is now vacant, and we would be taking down the building and putting in additional parking on that site as well. So between all of these parking, we will gain well over 400 parking spaces on campus. And if you see the pink block there, that is what we're calling this Northeast Tower. And in the Northeast Tower, the front of that will be an entrance to the emergency department. And the tower to the left of that is the East Tower that was our relatively newest tower. And in front of that, the whole front of the hospital will be for patient and visitor parking, making it much easier to navigate, to get in and out, and then to wayfind the campus itself. One other point I'll mention here, if you see that little blue box behind the Northeast Tower, that's a new central utility plant. So some of the cost of this modernization, this tower also includes not only parking enhancements, but creating an energy plant that will allow us to make more modernization and develop more projects in the future that can be supported by modern energy plant. And so there are other parking that will be displaced. Our physician parking will be relocated because the new tower will be in the location of our current physician parking. And we'll be doing some other enhancement in areas like the former emergency department as well. The last piece of our modernization plan for the Lynchburg region includes a specialty medical campus. The specialty medical campus is going to be operated in partnership with LifePoint Health. We have 2 hospitals that we're building on that campus. We originally talked with LifePoint Health, who had reached out to the system before I even started with Centra, and they said, we really think that your community is underserved for acute rehabilitation services. And as you look at Virginia Baptist Hospital and that lower level of the rehab unit, we have low ceilings and small rooms. We can't use modern features for lifting our patients, for improving their mobility, making it safe for them. It's dated, and it doesn't incorporate some of the things that you see in modern facilities like gymnasiums and areas where patients and their families can practice walking on different surfaces, things that will help them be safe and discharged to home. Things like apartments where they can practice activities of daily living to make sure they're ready to go home. So this new 50-bed rehab hospital will replace the 20-bed hospital within a hospital on the campus of Virginia Baptist Hospital, and will be located and built on this site. We have already received approval from the Commonwealth through the Department of Certificate of Public Need. The second hospital, which is going to be a freestanding 72-bed behavioral health hospital, is going to meet the challenges and the demands of behavioral health in our community. And it will be a state-of-the-art facility that not only will have the flexibility for us to manage cohorts of our patients, which is a challenge every day for us because we have pediatric patients, we have geriatric patients, we have adults, we have males, females, and so the flexibility is needed to be able to safely cohort them and care for them. The design of this facility will allow us to do that, but it will also create outdoor spaces where our patients can be in the sunshine, in nature, as part of their healing process. So these 2 hospitals will be built in partnership with LifePoint Health on that campus at Simon's Run. And so I think the last question most people have about the modernization plan is, this is a $500 million investment in the community. How on earth are you paying for that? Well, first, we want to say thank you to the city because you supported us refinancing our bonds back in 2021. So $246 million of the bonds that were refinanced before the rate hikes happened allow us at a very low fixed rate to make these investments on the campus here in the city. Those bonds also enabled us to move our fixed versus variable debt from 70% variable to 70% fixed, which means we have a lot more stability in terms of the rates and making these investments going forward. In addition to those bonds, we also, of course, rely on this community, which is tremendously philanthropic and giving, and our Centra Foundation, who helps us in partnership. And so through our operations, our bonds, and our foundation, we will be funding these. Now, I will mention, though, that it's a lot to do at any one time, and that's why we look for the best in partners, so that when we do have partnerships like LifePoint Health for behavioral health and rehab, that's part of what they bring to the table, is financing for some of these buildings. And so the joint venture for those 2, Centra will be Centra facilities. They will be operated as Centra facilities. They will be owned 51% by Centra, so we'll have majority ownership, and the land will also be owned by Centra. So please, be at ease in knowing that those are our partners, but that we also still have some degree of oversight and significant majority ownership. The timeline to completion varies by project. So as you can imagine, the hospital campus with enabling parking and utilities, and then the emergency department and tower, that will probably take us 4.5 years. Others, like the medical office building, once we're able to really move forward and do the site development work, 2.5 years maybe to build that building, and then 2 to 3 years for the specialty medical campus as well. I thank you for being so gracious with the time. I hope I didn't overrun it too much. I would be happy to answer any questions about our modernization plan.
Thank you very much. I appreciate all of your, all the details for sure. Anybody have any questions? No? Vice Mayor Foley?
Just a comment, thank you. This is very exciting, Amy, and I'm eager to see how this continues to improve our city. And more than anything else, I'm thankful for a few organizations in town that really are the driving force of our economy, and Centra is one of them. So thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing how this continues to build upon that strong relationship.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Councilman Dolan?
Thank you too also, and I think in order for our healthcare system to remain relevant and to keep moving forward, I think this whole modernization project is really essential. And I'm so glad to see what you're doing with the piece that's over at the Baptist now, the rehab piece, because that really is dated way beyond its lifespan. Thank you.
Dr. Wilder?
Yes, again, thank you for your service to our community. I mean, especially like as Mary Jane mentioned, in the health community, it's changing so rapidly. And in order for our community to be relevant, we must get changed with the times. And with all the new technology, I mean, it is moving so fast. So I appreciate the updating of the facility and the work and the $500 million investment you're making in our community. It is so crucial. One of the drawing factors to me of Lynchburg is our health facility. I mean, you live way out in the county somewhere, you know, getting medical care might be a challenge, but at least if you live in Lynchburg City, in the hub here, you know, you can really get the best health care. So we appreciate that. And also the improvements needed at the emergency room and the services you're doing there is so crucial. If you have kids and have been to the emergency room, you know it's going to be sometimes somewhat challenging. So we always need improvements there. So we appreciate that in making that investment to the facilities. And I noticed you mentioned you're moving the maternity ward, I guess, to the other facility. Are you closing down the maternity ward at the Virginia Baptist facility there?
So we will not be maintaining mother-baby services at Virginia Baptist or acute rehab or behavioral health. What we're looking at right now is how we can utilize the Virginia Baptist facility to support the community health needs of the folks that live in that area. And so some of the things that we're looking at are like, for example, the double-digit growth in the 65-plus population, some of the things around chronic conditions, other services for the aging, that may be some of the things that we can put on that campus when we build the new facilities to house those things that are currently in acute care. Okay. It's a beautiful campus, and I really love that campus, and I think that it merits some reinvestment. We just have to really figure out what the right things are to serve the community.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Councilman Missions?
You just answered my primary question because I was going to ask you about those two external facilities, and it sounds like you're going to be pulling all that away from Virginia Baptist, and then what was next for Virginia Baptist, so you went into that because that is a really neat building out there. So, but thank you for your time. I will tell you that I do have one concern about this. I don't think that the institutional zoning is appropriate for this. I drove back on Overbrook and Hillsdale over the weekend in those neighborhoods back there, and I know that the plat that was given to us for the meeting tonight identifies some parcels that aren't being requested to be rezoned to institutional rezoning, but the vote that we take tonight kind of sets that precedent for you guys, and I am just very uncomfortable with giving Centra carte blanche authority to do whatever they want with land in the future that butts right up to an existing, thriving residential neighborhood. I fully support the modernization plan. I think all of these things are needed. I just don't think that institutional zoning is the right approach. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts with me.
You're welcome.
Again, I echo the support. Beautiful plans, and of course, we just are so thankful for Centra and all that you do for our city, for our economy, and you know, it looks like we're bringing some new specialized programs to the city as well, which hopefully will bring some new medical talent, which will be also wonderful. It's great for the community, so thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. All right, if there's no further questions, we'll move on to the presentation of the proposed fiscal year 2024-2028 CIP. Ms. Donna Witt.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
So, just a little bit of information to get us started. I appreciate you all, Winter shared some feedback from you all this week, and it's very helpful, so I'm really appreciative of that. Just in looking at our capital improvement program process, and I know many of you are familiar with this, but maybe just to help our citizens understand a little bit about how we put this plan together. And staff does, starting up here at our flow chart, staff puts the needs together, shares them with departments that kind of carry those out, like Public Works, specifically engineering, those type of things. And then as those projects develop and really we start to cost them out and looking at things, anything that's under $25,000 will not survive 20 years or cannot be considered a true asset of the city, those really go in the operating budget. They don't go in the capital plan. Those are small, except for possibly some of our major building repairs, those type of things that are just maintenance. Those would go in the capital plan. But once all of that's put together, those projects are submitted and we give those over to what we call a priority team. And that's made up of our project managers and other key staff and departments that can kind of look at those as a whole and decide which ones are more important now, which ones can be maybe later in the CIP, which ones can be cash funded and not. And so they kind of put that together and rank them. And then that comes to me. And once I have that in hand, I work with our financial advisors on the affordability of the plan. And that's how it ends up in a proposed book. So it really is, it's not just anybody gets to ask for whatever they want. It really is a very vetted plan. So, and then why we do a 5-year plan. We follow a lot of the governmental finance officers' best practices. And of course, a 5-year plan is one of those best practices. But really, even though the first year of the CIP is the only year that gets appropriated, and staff cannot spend 1 penny that's not appropriated by the majority of council. So those out years of the CIP, we need to make sure that we really do have a plan and that we're always looking forward. So when you have a 5-year plan, it not only allows city council, but also our citizens the opportunity to look out there and see the direction the city's moving. You know, we have citizens that are interested specifically in their neighborhoods. Some are more interested in paving and those kind of things. And so it gives them an opportunity to kind of see what's coming. This also helps me build a financial strategy for how we build and fund these capital projects. And also, you really have programming for a 5-year period because some projects take more than 1 year to complete. So we always need to be looking at that. But again, only the first year of the capital plan is actually appropriated, giving staff the ability to move forward with those projects. And just so when you think about that, it doesn't mean that July 1st we automatically go out for bid for these projects. It goes through another vetting project or process of where we look at when we put it out for bid, receiving those bids, are they within budget? Do we need to regroup? So just because it's appropriated, that doesn't even give it an automatic go forward. It's vetted many times over. So projects with funding from other sources. So once we apply for revenue sharing or we intend to apply for other state funds or federal funds, once we've applied for those or we intend to apply for those, these organizations like VDOT actually look at our 5-year plan to make sure that the projects that we're going to apply for or have already applied for are in our plan. And you notice there's also a page in the transportation section with a whole nother long list of projects, and that's specifically in there for VDOT so they can see in the out years, eventually we've got to get to these other projects. So they like to see that in our plan. So even though we're not appropriating those, we're not funding those currently, they're in our plan, and they need to see those remain in our plan in order to receive that state and federal funding, which is critical to help us pay for our projects. So thinking about that and what's actually and I know this is small, but this is a list of our fiscal year 2024 projects. So this is the only year that is actually appropriated for spending. And you'll see our funding sources there as well. The first column has what would be GO bond or a line of credit. Most projects don't immediately get bond funded. We actually go through, and that's on our agenda today as well, for our line of credit or our bond anticipation note. So these projects would move forward with the next line of credit if appropriated. The next column is your pay-as-you-go projects. And again, just remember, these funds cannot be repurposed for ongoing expenses. It has to be used for one-time expenses. So those are our pay-as-you-go. It's been our practice, as long as I've been here, to use this money for our maintenance-type projects and our capital plan. And then the next column is our other funding, which is our state, federal, and grants funding. So the way I've laid this out is the total appropriation for these 2 years is $44.3 million. So you can see the end of the list there. But the way I kind of group these together, as you can see, the first number of projects, most of the projects are maintenance type projects, and most of those are funded with pay-as-you-go funding or cash. So there are some that have some line of credit funding in those if it's a larger project, but to the majority of maintenance projects, we try to use cash. The downtown development project is actually some maintenance, but also some downtown enhancements, and most of those are related to the 2040 master plan. So we do have some of those that are more long-term and not just maintenance, so we've split the funding of those. So just want to note that. The next page, you'll see the first several projects I call annual funding. So every year, I think since I've been here, we've had street utility extensions to promote economic development. And this is some money that we actually is cash funded. We set that aside. So if a developer comes in and says, I'm going to do X, Y, Z, this helps him with the utility extensions or maybe the sidewalk or something to help with that development, and we set those funds aside for that. The next one is a little bit different. It's the computer-aided dispatch replacement. This is the second year of funding for this. This is for our E911 system. So with this appropriation, it makes that about a $5 million project. But it's to completely, our E911 equipment is starting to come at end of life, so we've got to have a plan to start looking at this and see how we're replacing that and get that in place before we have any issues. The radio replacement funding is in here every year, and what we do, we don't spend this money on an annual basis, but we appropriate some cash every year, and then we save that up until we need to do a large radio replacement. And that's usually for our public safety or maybe even some of our public works. They still carry radios. And so we don't spend that every year, but we save that up until we need to make a large purchase so we can do it with cash. The Lynchburg City Stadium Capital Maintenance Reserve, this $100,000 has been in our CIP for several years, and this is based on a contract that we have with the Hillcats. And this funding, that contract's up in a couple of years, but it needs to be in there for this year. The Snow Street and Bridge Reserve, we have this $250,000 that we typically budget just in case we have more snow than we anticipate. We've got some extra money in there that helps us plow the streets, fill our salt barns, and that type of thing. After annual funding, you'll see a list of construction projects. The first is the police department headquarters. We're still making sure we've got all the funds appropriated we need as we move forward with that project. The Bedford Avenue Bridge is a state and federal funded project that has kind of gone through the years of the CIP and has come up in 2024. The Campbell Avenue intersection and signal reconstruction is $3.1 million, and I'll give you a little more information on that one in a minute. The College Park upgrade is a GEO-funded project for projects to this park that's around the University of Lynchburg. The Heritage Park improvements is a cash-funded project. It's got some out years later. This is around Heritage High School to put some improvements in that park. And then College Lake Dam. We've been putting money together for quite a while. We've got a requirement for dam safety from the DEQ, so this is a project that we need to move forward with to meet their timelines and their requirements, and we do have state funding in that project. The gateway improvements, Tyree at Pleasant Valley, this is CDBG funded, so it's $118,000. And then we move into our design projects. So only the first year is design that's in 2024. The first one is D Street and Rivermont Avenue intersection improvements, $945,000, and I'm gonna talk to you a little bit more about that one in a second. And then Timberlake Road Bridge is westbound lanes. This is a really large project. It's about $10 million for each lane. It's considered maintenance. My understanding is it does not meet the requirements for revenue sharing, but we have a bridge maintenance plan. My understanding is it's coming up that it's time to do this. If we don't make these maintenance and we push it off, then it could be more costly repairs later. The Memorial Avenue fuel site reconstruction, this is $65,000 for design to start the replacement for our fuel pumps over on Memorial Avenue. Then we have planning and engineering. This is, the first project here is our transfer station for refuse. We need to have something in place for when Campbell County becomes full. We don't have the equipment or the staff to pick up our trash, take it all the way to Amelia, dump the trucks, make it all the way back, and continue picking up trash. So we really need to start looking for what our next plan is. Breezewood Drive widening. This is right-of-way, and then there's 3 years of construction for that. And then the future streetscape improvements downtown. This is the city cap construction that goes along with the water line replacement. So that's all of those projects. So some of the projects that are really locally funded, I thought maybe it's necessary to talk about why now. So the transfer station, as I mentioned, we've already appropriated $300,000, and staff has already started working with a consultant to kind of figure out what's next. Because we do need to have a plan in place and a transfer station, something. I'm certainly not the expert. I told you I don't build them, I just fund them. But we need to have something in place that's going to work for our trash. We've got to have somewhere to take our trash when Campbell County is full. The Campbell Avenue intersection and signal in reconstruction. This is a $3.1 million project. It is all locally funded, but my understanding is the signal is at end of life, and that there's pavement issues there. It's a concrete intersection that needs to be torn up and be asphalt. There's some safety concerns for pedestrians in that area. And so that's why that project, it's kind of moved through the CIP, and we're at where we need to do that project. The future streetscape improvements for downtown, again, as the water lines are replaced, we need to be able to put those things back better. We've made commitments not only to citizens, but also our downtown residents, our downtown businesses, of what they can expect as we replace these water lines and make sure the sidewalks are put back better in the roads. Oh, I skipped over D Street. Oh, that's a really important one, because this one, thank you, is on the necessary now, but it's also on your necessary later list. So this project is in coordination with the new hotel on Rivermont Avenue. So we moved it up in the CIP with the understanding that the D Street intersection it's really not safe now. It's kind of hairy when you come out of there. But once the hotel would open and there would be more traffic in that area, it would not be safe. And I know, Mr. Taylor, you don't like roundabouts. So right now, I think the assumption is it could possibly be a roundabout, but there's no design, there's nothing been done. So I think the final say-so is kind of with VDOT, and depending on if we end up with revenue sharing for this project. But just because we would appropriate this and start to look at design and what's done, we wouldn't move forward with this unless the hotel moved forward. So if something happened and slowed up that project, we're not going to start this project until we know. It'd be silly. So because if it's not for the hotel, this really could move to later on in the CIP. But we don't really know how fast the hotel's going to move yet and what that's going to look like. So to appropriate the design, and then we hold off until we understand what's happening with that hotel. And like I said, if it doesn't move forward, even though this design money would be appropriated, we wouldn't spend it or even look at doing an RFP or anything until we understand what's going to happen with that hotel, because that's why it got moved up. I explained the computer-aided dispatch replacement. We really are at the end of life of this software. We've got to have a plan to get that replaced. It's a large project. It's $5 million. And then the Memorial Avenue fuel site reconstruction is a $1.3 million project, but again, we can't find ourselves at end of life of equipment, and we can't get fuel. Our public safety vehicles, our public works vehicles, we've got to have a plan there. So really, that's why those projects I would term as necessary now. This next slide, this is our out years of projects. And again, these are projects that we have either applied or received or plan to apply for some type of state or federal funds. And that's why those are out in the years they are for when they're going to start based on those plans. It's important we leave them there for VDOT and other funding organizations to see what those plans are. So, and happy to answer any questions about that. So then, thinking more about 2024, because that's really what we're asking to be appropriated by City Council and approved by City Council. Some of these projects were on the necessary later list. I would argue that all these projects are important, but some of them could be pushed out should council wish. So the first one on here is the downtown development, and that's the project that follows the 2040 master plan. That some of it is maintenance and some of it is enhancements for the Bluff Walk. Mr. Feraldi, this has your Christmas lights on it. So that's one of those projects. We don't absolutely have to do that. It's some of the larger projects, 200,000 of it would go on a line of credit. The majority of it is cash funded. That's the downtown development. Just so fully transparent here. Okay, and then the College Park upgrade, there's nothing that makes that critical now. It's a line of credit project. And also the Heritage Park improvements, that's a cash funded project, but that could be pushed out. At some point, we really want to make those improvements to make that park better. We kind of have a park desert in the Timberlake area, so this would be a good thing for the citizens that live out in that area. The gateway improvements, Tyriana, Pleasant Valley, that did receive CDBG funds. It doesn't have to be done, but those funds have been allocated to that project, so it's fully funded. The D Street Rivermont Avenue intersection improvements, like I said, it's on the necessary now, but it's also on this can wait, necessary later, just based on how that hotel moves forward. And then the Timberlake Road Bridge westbound lanes, if council wish, the design could be moved out. But again, we're risking that if we don't do the maintenance timely, it could cost more later if we need to do more extensive repairs because we didn't do the maintenance. So that's about $3.5 million that I've highlighted that's possible to look at, could be done later if council so chooses. And then this last slide is the necessary later projects for the full CIP. So you see there's a whole lot of projects in there. It's about $178 million, I think, when you look at all of it, that even if we've received some money for funding for these, we could design, wait. I'd hate to do this, but they could be pushed out if council chose. But again, eventually we're going to have to do these projects. And I guess it's, I know right now as we apply for VDOT projects, when we do those applications and we're looking at bridge maintenance, we have always used, not always, but lately we have used $350 per square foot to do bridge maintenance. And VDOT has come back and told us we should be using $750 per square foot just because of the cost of concrete, supplies, labor, all of that. So I know in talking to Mr. Helgeson, we've talked about if you wait, could the prices come down with a recession, that kind of thing. It's debatable. So happy to answer any questions I can.
Thank you, John. Very helpful. I think I'll, for my colleagues, I will be looking at primarily page 8 and 9. This was very helpful. My focus is not so much on what's highlighted. My focus is on the middle column, the pay-as-you-go one-time cash funds. I want to keep what's in highlighted. I want to stress that. There's a lot of things in the CIP within the highlighted category, if you will, that are really productive and helpful. I think the downtown lights, as an example, it's kind of highlighted. I think that one will pay for itself. I'm very confident in that. We see the results of what happens in Roanoke, for example, with bringing in that type of tourist attraction. I think we could do it better, but that's an example. The park improvements, Donna highlighted it. I couldn't agree more. But if we focus on the pay-as-you-go one-time cash, that's where I'm drilling in. There's really one reason why it's interesting hearing how just because something's put in the CIP doesn't mean it's funded now. Doesn't mean it's funded later down the road. And yet, I'd be curious to know if there's ever been a project put in the CIP that's ever been taken out 3 or 4 years down the road because council so chose, outside of like, well, the partnership fell apart. I mean, just council said, never mind, we just want to change course. So I understand the logic, but I also want to submit a doubt that happens often. And so focusing on the pay-as-you-go, if you take out, I did some quick math, so it could be wrong. If you take out the connections to other funding or bonds, for those tracking home, these are projects just funded with one-time capital. By my estimate, that's, I believe, right at 4.9 or 5 million And that's just adding up what's on this sheet here. And
The total of that column is $11 million.
right, it's
10.984.
10.9, but what I'm doing is I'm pulling out even the ones that are associated with bonds or federal
Oh,
money or
okay.
state money.
Okay.
And that's, I'm being generous with the logic here, so track with me. Just
Alright.
the funds that are associated with one-time costs that are standalone by themselves. To my iPhone calculator, that's about $400.95 million. Ultimately, I voted against the CIP at the outset and the second time for this reason. I think there's cash here that we've been saying we want to find ways to find creative ways for tax relief and other opportunities for investment with the city. This is where the bulk of the money has been, and I've said that since the get-go. I've said that since January. This is where the dollars are going to be, and sure enough, here we are in June, and there's $5 million right in this category that I've come up with today. There's more here, of course, if you look at major building repairs and improvements, multiple projects. We're using 5.6 million out of 6.6 total of local cash, and then we're using a local line of credit for another $1 million. So there's more to be found here is what I'm trying to say. So if I could put a bow on this, that's where I want to spend my time focusing on. If my colleagues want to go a different direction, please feel free to. But I had to offer that context within the line of a couple questions that I did have. So if we're all on the same page, why are we using 5.6 million of one-time pay-as-you-go cash for, quote, major improvements and building repair?
Because they're maintenance, and I would not bond fund those. I don't bond fund wallpaper, carpet, real maintenance type things. I don't think that's how you spend your bond money, because you're gonna spend it you're gonna pay for it for 20 years. And in my world, it doesn't make sense. You should pay for as much maintenance as possible with cash, so that you're not paying on that over a 20-year period.
I'm tracking. I don't disagree. I'm just going to come at it with a different perspective. So help me understand why in the long run, where, especially in the last few years with the leftover funds, the surplus, however you want to articulate it, you've had so much and then so much and then so much. How is that an effective way to maintain your buildings if one year you've got $20 million of additional tax revenue, the next year you've only got $5 million because of a recession? How does that make for an effective way to maintain major improvements?
And I agree. In Donna's world, if we could put maintenance in the operating budget and be able to fund it there, that's what I would do.
Yeah.
In my tenure here, and I've kind of kept the process as it started, is at the end of the year, money falls to fund balance. That's your surplus. You apply your financial policies, and when you do your calculations based on your percentages of revenue and those type of things, when you do all that calculation, then you have money left over. And in the history, my 23 years, that has been used for PAYGO. Now, the last 2 years, like 24 is based on 22, because we're not to the end of 23 yet. So 23 was based on 21. And I will say, we'll never have this type of cash again, this amount of cash, because we're back to where we can project our revenues better. During COVID, had no clue how to project revenues while the city was down. We were completely closed down, trying to make revenue projections, not knowing if restaurants could open, all that kind of stuff. You know that history. And so, I drastically under-projected my revenues. I would say going forward, if we have 4 to 5 million going forward, that's going to be significant. So knowing that, when you look at the 5 years, the next 4 years for major building repairs, we're going to have to significantly cut that down over the next 4 years, because I don't anticipate that type of money of what's been programmed here.
So two trains of thought, at least for the future. One, I'm inclined to agree with Ms. Witt that if we have a line item for ongoing repairs, if we're talking about the fluctuation and the inconsistency with funding and the consistency of growth, which track with me, I think that makes sense, because otherwise you've got 4.5 cents on the real estate, or whatever, 5 cents on the real estate tax roped into unexpected tax revenue, and then we have what has happened in the past. So that's one thing. The second is, I don't see how we get to say we're going to expend all this right. I mean, were these maintenance requests there last year, the year before, and now all of a sudden we've got, I mean, $5.5 million is a lot. Like, I'm trying to wrap my brain around that for an example.
They're submitted for the 5 years as a best guess. They are reviewed every year to see if some need to come out and different ones go in, or some gets added based on need and how they're submitted to Public Works.
I have another question. I'll turn it over to somebody else, because
Let's see.
at least this might get us going in conversation. So one of the other ones is $1 million in street improvement. I'll give you a chance to get there.
Oh, general street improvements?
So we have a street improvement bucket already. This is more well and beyond, over the top, extra, more dollars.
But this is something we fund most years, and this is, let me get there. These are things that come up during the year that if we get a sinkhole, we got to have some money to fix it.
I guess I'm
If
asking-
the developers, something happens with a new development type thing, this is, it's kind of a pot of money that we can use for reimbursement to developers based on whatever those new projects are. But these are curb, gutter, sidewalk petitions, annual contractual improvements, subdivisions, and storm sewer improvements, and street improvements, and signalization. So it really is for developments and emergencies.
I think that's awesome. Do we have that already somewhere else, and what's the total on that? That's kind of what my point is. Like, is this putting more on top than we already have? And if so, why?
We, in the past, this has been an annual appropriation because it's specifically for this. There's some other pot projects out there, but this has actually grown to $1 million based on inflation. Like I said, the cost of concrete, sidewalks, and all that stuff has really escalated. So we did beef this up a little bit this year just because of the cost of everything. But there's not really another fund like this.
So, sort of is the answer, and it's been at lower levels
Yes.
based out of this
Yes.
allocation. Okay.
Yes, but
I
this
think-
is really specifically for that.
I would like to let my colleagues pitch in. I might follow up with additional comments and notes I've taken, but I want to be fair to everyone else, so.
Thank you. Councilman Missions?
So, there was one statement you said in that, that I would agree with, where you said we're never gonna be sitting on this kind of cash that we're sitting on right now. However, we will be if we don't spend it. So if we don't spend it, we'll still be sitting on the cash.
Right, if you chose not to put this money
Right.
in maintenance, it would go back into fund balance.
So looking at the same column, the pay-as-you-go capital column that the vice mayor was discussing, I know that I've brought this to, I think, all of your attention, and then I've shared a pretty big breakdown of that 5.6 million of the major building repairs and improvements, multiple projects. And some of these questions, I think, were some questions that you had, Vice Mayor. 18 of the projects on that are new projects that weren't on there last year. 13 of the projects had an increase in price, and some of them were very significant. And when I look at these compared to the last year's CIP, the aviary went from $25,000 for replacing a heating and air conditioning system to $200,000 for replacing a heating and air conditioning system, including energy panels. So what are these $175,000 energy panels?
I think that was answered in your memo to
Was it?
council about each of your projects and why the scope either changed or why the price increased.
Okay.
Did you get the memo?
I may have missed that one.
Oh, well, that was a really important one for you. Yeah, we did a response to the questions that you asked on May 27th. The aviary went from a simple replacement of heating and air conditioning to a complete redesign of the system. It was determined the current system is unable to effectively handle the size of the building.
Got it. That'll be helpful.
I
So-
apologize if you
so-
didn't
so
receive that.
redesigning the system is going to be,
Well,
an
the
extra 100.
redesign plus the replacement,
so the redesign is 175,000 because the replacement
with
was,
the replacement.
so the replacement was scheduled for this year for 25,000 in last year's budget. So we're talking a line item that went from 25,000 to 200,000, right?
Correct.
There is no amount of HVAC design that costs $175,000.
It's not just for the design, that includes the replacement. It went from a simple heat pump or whatever.
So they were going to
I'm
replace the
at
heat
a
pump and the air
loss here.
handler, and then now they're doing a lot more?
Yes,
Okay.
they had to completely redesign of what would meet the needs of that building. So it went from a simple replacement to it's a bird cage, you know? I mean, it's not really meant to be heated and cooled, so I think it's,
You know this, that they're,
Yep.
it's moved from an aviary that was meant for
Yeah.
birds and what have you, to now it hosts many of our most memorable events in any one season. So I think Rex Parks and looking at that and making sure that, I've been in there a couple times when the climate
Gets a little warm.
was a little warm, and so in that respect, to Donna's point, that's the consideration that's being made here.
I mean, the thing that I'm having trouble with here is that there's such a big variance between what was planned for last year to occur in fiscal year '24 in those projects, right? To what we're actually going to do going forward. And it's a big number. I mean, we're talking an increase of almost $3 million just to that one line item.
right, and we did, like I said,
I think I
hopefully
did see
we
this,
answered the
actually.
ones that you asked about. Circuit
Yep.
Court specifically, we had a U.S. Marshal come in for a security assessment, and the judges asked that we move forward on their recommendations. So the replacement of the windows went from a simple replacement of the windows to security issue. So some of the scope on many of those projects changed, and then some of them were actually the unanticipated percentage of inflation that has occurred. Now, that may settle back down some, but
I can tell you, looking at the increase of 50,000 to Station 5 for the floors, also with the cabinets and countertops, there's just no sanity in that number unless you're putting platinum plated floors, because it's a very small amount of square footage. I know exactly how it's laid out. There's just, I don't know. And frankly, I have concerns about where the money's going. I have concerns about, how, some of these numbers are just absolutely inflated on some of these projects. And I'm having a real hard time with it, with us not being able to really have oversight on how those pennies are spent.
well, all of these projects will have to be procured through procurement. So we've got to have bids. We take the low bid, so they'll be scrutinized before the money's spent. But I know in a lot of these the fire stations, the fire staff has come back and requested a long list of things that they would also like. So,
And Mr. Part of that too, if there's is it not projected? I can't tell.
I can hear you.
You
I don't
can-
know if everybody else can
Okay.
hear you, but I can hear you.
Part of that is moving forward to each of you. If there are certain things that are of interest of import, because Donna's right, we're subject to VPPA, right? So we have to provide a process by which, under state code, that there are ways in which the people submit. They give us certifications, they give us cost estimates, and then to the degree that our staff vet those, then choose, we do low bid. Any one of those, if you highlight and say that this is of interest to you, that's a simple memo. That's a simple say, here we are in process, here were some of the projects that you pointed out to us that you wanted to follow. These are the bids that we've received, this is where we're headed, and we're willing to now, what's the proper word, engage, approve, recommend, what have you, and give you kind of the full detail of what we're getting as far as these costs, because no, the floors are not platinum, I know that. But that being said, I have to lean into our people. Donna talked about the process.
Yeah.
It starts in August. When it got to the financial advisor, she didn't put the number, but it's in your memo. Working together with the financial advisor, we pulled out $168 million ever before it got to what we proposed to you. So we are, just like you, making sure that we're being good stewards of the public purse. And if there are projects on there, and yes, some of the increase from last year to this year, part of that is just like what we said, things come up. But if there's something that you want us to track and make sure that you're aware of, we can absolutely do that.
Have there been any issues in the past where there were any situations where kickbacks were identified from any contractors to any city employees?
So what I think you're referencing there is a personnel matter that I cannot speak to here. I will tell you that there was something that came up within the last year that we immediately highlighted, and we involved our local police department. That police department investigated and turned it over to our Commonwealth's attorney. And at the time, with the evidence that she had before, did not proceed to prosecute. Now, if there are new things, other things that have come to light since then we're not aware of, I can say that personnel matter, that employee no longer works for the city.
Because with that history is where my concern comes from.
And
When
what
I
I'd
look
say-
at when I look at some of these numbers,
Sure.
with that history is where my concern comes from, because these are the taxpayers' dollars.
Understood.
And if there's anything going on, or has been anything going on with their money that hasn't been above board to line the pocket of a city employee, like, was, I guess, alleged previously,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
And that is something that should raise the eyebrows of everybody up here and everybody in this room.
Understood.
And when I see inflated
Absolutely.
numbers, the way that they've inflated from year to year, that really concerns me.
Well, and I will tell you, the first concerns with that situation were raised in procurement.
I'm sure that they were,
And what I'd
because I
say,
know you have a keen eye on things.
Yes. And what I'd say too, in understanding, and I heard kind of rumblings about maybe this particular question, I did ask Donna whether or not this employee was involved in any of this process. Not at all.
Okay. I still think we need to figure out a way to spend less in that pay-as-you-go column. I am very uncomfortable with appropriating this amount of cash without having an auditor appointed by city council. I'm going to be very clear about that. And it's kind of where I'm at. So,
So we talked about the pay-as-you-go, but some of the other projects, the debt funded, some of these, and I'm glad that some of these can be pushed off a year, which every one of these that possibly can, we should. And I think a few others that need to be pushed off a year that aren't highlighted in yellow, that I think would be easily pushed off a year, is one, the $3 million for the Campbell Avenue interchange. That can be pushed off a year. The future streetscape improvements to downtown, another $6 million, and over the course of another 5 years, it's $56 million. And I get it, and this isn't all the money either, because there's other money that's coming from water resources that's ripping out and changing those lines. And when we look at the magnitude of money that has been spent on downtown redevelopment or streetscape improvements already, we have 50 square miles in the city. And this is a half a square mile downtown, and an additional 56 million. Some of these items, we need to trim it. May not necessarily say, carte blanche, remove the whole 6 million and the whole 56 million going forward. but at least as best as possible, cut this one in half and defer the rest of it. Because when we're looking at how much money is being spent, and it's titled in economic development, meaning we need to have an impact on there. I looked at lots of the improvements that happen around the city. You know, we just had Central Health was talking about some of their improvements and what they're doing. We looked over at Liberty University, and you look over at River Ridge Mall. The city didn't contribute $56 million to improve that. They improved it. And so with that, we've looked at the, a cash cow that has been in the funding of downtown. I don't know how many times the sidewalks and bridges and roads have been changed and changed and changed. Meanwhile, people on Leesville Road have yet to get their first sidewalk. How many sidewalks are this going to be on the downtown streetscape downtown? So with that being the case, and this money that is, I'm looking at the two columns, because these are 100% local money, the GO bond, 22.5 or 22.7, and the pay-as-you-go another 11 million. Of the 2024, that is 76% of all the funding is coming from our local taxpayers. Some of the items, the way they get into the capital improvement plan is because there used to be a pretty good need for it. And as Donna mentioned, we're alluding and looking and planning in the future. Hey, we're gonna need some new cabinets in a fire department, or we're gonna need, a new water line and these kind of things. We're thinking about those. But sometimes they just stay in there because they've been in there before. I think if we can defer most of these projects, as many of them as we can for a year, we're earning interest. Aren't we earning pretty good interest on their money sitting in cash right now?
Yes.
So we're, with the Federal Reserve that's raised the discount rate, we're getting interest off of here. Right now, it's amazing the prices of things, how high they've become because of inflation. Because of inflation, because of federal spending. Secondly, because of a supply chain issue, when people were paid and not work, prices of things are through the roof. So deferring these things a year, I think we're gonna get paid to wait because we're gonna have money sitting in cash that's earning interest. Secondly, I think as these things that are not essential, obviously, when you got a roof that's leaking, we gotta take care of that. You got a water line that breaks, you gotta take care of that. Totally get it. But lots of these things are not just like critical. And pushing them off a year or two, I think is gonna help us be in a much better financial position because we got lots of debt. All of these GO bonds, that means that in the future, we're gonna have to raise the taxes in order to pay debt service on these GO bonds. So it's not just the cash that we have here. And secondly, as Donna, or thirdly, or fifthly, or how many ever points I'm making, as Donna stated, next year, most likely, that surplus is going to be less. With the surplus being less, that means less money for pay-as-you-go. Less money is pay-as-you-go. That means every dollar that we spend today has got to be that much more judicious on where we spend it, rather than just saying, "Hey, we got lots of items that we can spend money on." I think maybe some of the items that have grown so much that we've already heard about. 100%, 300% is because we have this one-time cash. You got one-time cash, what do you do when it's not your money? You spend it, because next year it may not be there. We're sitting behind this dais not to be able the ones that just hit buttons and dole out money, but we're the ones that hit the button that safeguards money. And I think more of these projects that can be deferred for a year, I think we're going to be in a much better financial position because we're going to be getting interest on the money that we don't spend. We're not going to be spending interest, nor are we going to be spending highly inflated prices on some of these projects. And thirdly, I think over a year from now, we can recognize that these revenues are coming in less, and we need to be as judicious as possible. Because, again, another $6 million this year on downtown streetscape improvements, that's got to go. I drive that Campbell Avenue intersection. I know there's problems with it, but 100% local for another $3 million, that can't be there. We're looking at several of these other items that are in here. I think there was, and I recognize some of these other portions in the capital improvement plan are in the future. You know, for example, our school system. We have lots of money here in school buildings, and we don't even know what schools are going to be in place. Where's this 2.6 million for school improvements going?
The school projects are there at the,
The school security and then.
yeah, the school security improvements, the school building roof replacements, school paving and fencing improvements, and school exterior building envelope repairs. And none of those are for elementary schools. They're either middle schools or high schools.
Okay. And in our schools CIP, there is out years, I realize, but I think it may be good to clean it up, to wipe out some of those out years. I think we got some out years of 35 million or
Yeah, there is a
70.
placeholder, but it's not a real project. We wouldn't appropriate it, we wouldn't fund it.
Yep.
It's just a placeholder to recognize schools is working on a plan, and that at some point, we're gonna have to do something based on that plan.
Yeah.
So the number really is nothing. I mean, it's just irrelevant. It's just a placeholder.
So having a zero in there would be just as
It's-
good as having
You could put a zero in
which I think would be a good thing. I mean, quite frankly, since 73.5 million is just as good as zero, I think it would probably be wise to have zero. I mean, if they're the same.
Majority vote.
Because what you're doing is now you're saying, you know, all these new school buildings that are projected to have debt service, because sometimes a lot of things, people are saying, hey, there's a plan for new buildings. We're now listening to a consultant that's saying, hey, maybe you could build a bunch of new buildings. And you got now 75 million bucks is planned. Maybe that's not a good thing. You know, it may be better to say, yeah, there's really zero. I mean, obviously we can change that allocation because that's a long-term capital improvement plan. Once we actually see a bona fide need that says, yeah, these are crumbling. So I think that would be an easy way to take our $520 million capital improvement plan down because it'd be more applicable. And these right here, again, the yellow ones plus I think we can defer. Now on your last chart that you have here, your last spreadsheet, city capital necessary later projects. So let's define necessary later. So one easy thing to do, I think that we could do, save lots of time and whatnot, is take those city capital projects that you think are necessary later and say, well, okay, we'll debate that another day. Let's just slide them all over one. Is that what necessary later means?
At some point, you're going to need to do these projects.
Yeah, and so if we slide all of them over a year, like we take the budgeted 2024, the 3.5 million like you already highlighted, the plan 2025 of another 30 million next year, and we just slide them all over a year, meaning instead of 2024, this one's 2025. Instead of 2025, this one's 2026. And then once we get to next year's CIP, you can actually say, well, this one can be a lot further out, or this one should be a lot closer to the front, right? Would that be an easy solution? Whoever wants to answer that? Is that what the necessary later?
But
The terminology there, because and I, maybe in speaking to each of you, try to use a term of art that didn't say essential, non-essential.
Yep.
Because I think what we would articulate here, I hope that we're doing at least a reasonably good job at doing, is that at some point, these projects, you're gonna have to do them, right? And Councilman Ferrari or someone who had said if there's a project that has changed in time, I know that in my experience in the 20-plus years, there have been those projects that do change, that do subsequently you decide that you're not gonna do for whatever different reason. So I've at least experienced, have I experienced it here? No. But what we did as a staff and working with each of you was we wanted to make sure that you understood that after a vetting process, what we would propose is that these are projects that are all very necessary. It's just whether or not you perform them now. And that's where I think Donna showed some of the urgency, showed you where there's money, that's whether it's federal or state, and then other experiences like Region 2000 where it's going and we need a plan for trash, right? So that's where we'd say, that's how we define it. And for necessary later, we'd offer, these are going to be projects at some point that the city needs to invest in. We would just offer, if we're helping council kind of create a delineation, these are projects, and to your point, Councilman Hakelson, that we can push a year.
So these all could be pushed a year?
That's right.
Yeah, that was, yeah, that's what I thought that was what that meant. And so they're necessary, but later. And so later would mean, okay, just since the only thing that really matters is the allocation on the first year of the CIP, because that's what's the legal authorization of spending. So if we can take at least all of these projects that are necessary later, move them out 1 year, plus add to this year's projects, some of those that I've outlined, I think that would be a very, very good start. Again, some of those funds that I think we can push off a year easily is that Campbell Avenue interchange, the futurescapes to improvements downtown. Again, maybe not the whole thing, but we can decide what is actually roads are going to be ripped up in this fiscal year and need to be put back together. And then the third one, what's the third one I mentioned?
Schools.
The schools was the fourth item.
Campbell Avenue,
The what?
Campbell Avenue.
The Campbell Avenue, the downtown, oh, and I guess you already had some of the other ones in there. I think those would be good. It keeps a lot of the things, I'm hopeful that computer-aided dispatch is still, and the radio replacements are still the critical ones. It sounded like you said that those seem like they're needed from a, moving forward. But I think if we do some of these, that's gonna give us a lot of room. If we pull out some of these other projects, obviously, we all talked about before that the big project that the parking lot down to the parking deck downtown, hopefully that's been removed out of the 520. Hopefully, if we can remove some of the 73 million, it makes it something that's, I think, something that's at least more realistic. Because I don't think there's anybody up here that's gonna say, yeah, we're gonna build a brand-new school for $73 million, so let's make sure we have the capacity in it for next year. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think that's the case. Thank you.
Thanks. Dr. Wilder?
Yeah, thank you for the information, I appreciate it. You know, most of my comments were given at the beginning of the session, like in February, when we looked at the CIP plan. And I appreciate what the city staff has done, what they put together. I appreciate the plan and the forward-thinking plan they put together to keep our city moving and going forward. I think it's so important for us to make investments in our city, to make sure our city continues to grow. I look at Liberty University, how they've invested millions and millions and billions of dollars in having a beautiful campus that persons from all over the world will come and use. So just as in our city, we want to make sure our city is up to date, like with the Central is doing the half a $500 million they're investing right now to make sure the health facilities are needed, as well as our downtown. If you look at any city in our community, the first place they're going to go to is Main Street. That's the mecca of any urban area. That's the mecca of any city, Roanoke, Danville, or wherever you are. You're going to go and look for the Main Street and see what's happening. So I understand the investment needed in our Main Street area and our downtown area, because it is the economic hub of your community, and it is one of the oldest parts of our community. So it's going to need some infrastructure investments, some sidewalk improvements. It's going to need some major investments, which we have been doing over the past 20 years because of the growth I've seen. I went to an event about 2 weeks ago at the Downtown Association, where they gave out about 10 grants to some of our up-and-coming businesses to help them change some of the storefronts in our community. They gave like $10,000 and five, whatever, just several dollars of investment that the community put into that coffer to help improve our downtown area, to get rid of some of the vacant facilities. So again, more persons in our community are making investments in our downtown area because they understand the economic value of businesses and how we have a strong downtown area. So I appreciate the investment the city has put forward together. I am in full support of the investments, and looking at some of the investments on the city capital necessary later projects, they have been pushed off later already enough. I don't want to see any of those projects pushed off anymore. I get questions every day about the sidewalk on Florida Avenue and some of the other projects that when it's going to be coming. One guy said he's not voting until we get the sidewalk in. So, I continue to get people asking that same question. I thought it was in like 25. Now I see it's in 26, 27, so it's been pushed off already. I thought it was supposed to be earlier. So several projects have already been pushed off. I don't want to see any more of these projects pushed off, and where the citizens who are paying taxes, who are asking for things, their vote matters as well. They might not be rich, and they might not be the wealthiest people, but again, still, their voice should matter because they live in our city and pay taxes. So I appreciate that. We need to have a comfort level of our procurement process. What I'm hearing is like an untrust, where we don't trust the procurement, we don't trust the city staff, we don't trust the people we hired to make these judgments, like our city manager and various other staff members, and yourself included. We don't trust what you were saying. So I understand you got to validate certain things, but I do have a faith and trust in you. For the past 23 years, you have been doing this job, coming from Liberty University and doing things in the city. We got to have some kind of a trust in you, and also the great standards that you have applied yourself to, and also the great awards that we as a city have received for the accounting processes that we have done, in addition to a clean audit report. So I have faith in your process. I have faith in the procurement process in our city. If we don't have faith in it, then we need to look at our procurement process and see what things need to be changed and those kind of things of that nature. So I appreciate that process as well. We've got to keep our city moving forward. If we're going to stop now, put all the brakes on everything and just say we're going to stop, what kind of city are we going to live in? If Liberty University and said we're going to stop right now and not build any more dorms, not any more athletic facilities, not build any more things, what kind of city, what kind of institution would they have if they had stopped construction 10 years ago? But they had a forward thinking about kids coming to this community and investment. Well, the city has grown to now over 80,000 people. So our city has grown, and we've continued over the past 20 years to make investments in our city, invest in the infrastructure, invest in downtown to keep up with the times, to make sure our city continues to grow. We want to have a city that people want to come to the downtown with our living quality, with our walking trails, with our nice lights and other things. They come to say, I see the city is improving. They don't want to come and see empty, vacant buildings. They'll run down infrastructure, storefronts that need to be abandoned, need to be torn down. They don't want to see that. They want to see something that's happening in our community. And I want to see our city continue to grow and continue to flourish, that people want to say, I want to live in Lynchburg. I want to move downtown. I want to make additional investments. I look at the investment they're making on Bedford Avenue, the area that I grew up in. They're making millions of dollars of investment in that one block around the corner from where I grew up. I never would have thought a major investment like that. If you're from Lynchburg, and you know, if you're from Lynchburg, I know some people are not, I've been there all my life. I never would have thought that much major investment would go on the corner of Bedford Avenue. So again, because they believe in our city, they believe it's growing, they believe it's worth that investment. That's why they're doing that. So I want to thank the staff. Thank you for the information you gave us months ago. I appreciate that. I appreciate the work in looking at how we're going to support these things, how we're going to fund these projects, the best way to do it. I know you've probably lost many sleepless nights trying to figure out how to make all this work. I appreciate your work, and I appreciate your efforts. Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a few questions. So first of all, because I made a list, because there's a lot to kind of unpack here. So I'm going to start with the 5.6 million. So I respect the fact that, you know, our council members want to get things done, you know, the least expensive way possible. What I'm assuming has happened is we have kind of rough estimates that are given initially when you give us this amount, and that's kind of the guesstimate that we're looking at. Then when it goes through procurement, we have bids, and then we look at what those bids come in at. Sometimes we might be pleasantly surprised that things come in lower, but you have to get, you know, a general idea of what you're spending. But we also want to pay attention that, you know, we get what we pay for too. And I know we've had some situations where we've had some issues where we haven't had the best quality work. So and all of us have had that happen in our personal lives. So I know we also want to consider those things when we're looking at bids. But I trust that we're looking at those things in each project. So I know these are guesstimates, and then we're going to have the actual cost. And I appreciate the fact that you explained that we can be part of those processes per each project. So thank you for explaining that. I did have a question also about the 3.5 million for the, you know, kind of necessary later. I know you kind of gave that a fun title, just to kind of versus not essential, but, you know, that is, some of these things may not be necessary later depending on the people that it affects. So I would like to talk to you about some of the stuff that was going on in the pay-as-you-go piece and the improvements. We were talking about the College Hill, College Park upgrade and, the Heritage Park improvements. What was that specifically again? What was being done over there?
This is the park behind Heritage High School.
Right.
It's kind of down behind it, and looking to make that a really nice park for that area. Right now, it's there's not a whole lot there.
Okay. And then the, I know this is in the bond line, but the College Park upgrade, remind me again?
That's a park that is beside the University of Lynchburg.
Yeah, okay.
There's some storm drainage issues and some things there that they really want to put some enhancements in that park to make it really better and usable.
To make it a park.
Right.
For all who used to live over near there, so he's
Got it. Okay, so then regarding what Councilman Helgeson mentioned in the bond line for the Campbell Avenue intersection reconstruction and the future streetscape improvements downtown, I believe in our conversation the other day, can you kind of go back over those two specific projects? Because one of them is part of something that we're currently doing around the city, correct?
That's correct, and the way that project works, it's kind of an ongoing project that we design so many blocks one year, and then the next year we actually do the construction. So 2024 is a construction year, that's why it's $6 million, and that is for the next several blocks past 12th Street. So it'll be Main Street from 12th on down towards the expressway.
Right.
So those are the next blocks in the plan for water replacement. And then this would redo those blocks as far as make the sidewalks better, get the appropriate, I don't know if there's trees in there or not, but we figured out kind of a while ago we had the wrong trees and they were tearing up the sidewalks. So redoing a lot of that so it's more pedestrian friendly, beautification,
Right.
put the road back, that type of thing.
And this would simultaneously, obviously, be addressing some of these problems we've had with some of these old water pipes that we've been
Yes,
having trouble
yes,
with in the city
yeah.
that have shut things down, like the fire station, and caused problems down here, right?
Well, and when Bluff Lock flooded,
Bluff Lock
that
flooded,
was a
right,
water
so-
line break. And also, there's an issue with fire suppression. All the residents that live downtown now, they're putting in larger lines as well, is because the water pressure isn't good. And I know we've had some firemen express their concern about fire pressure for fire suppression. So that's part of what they're looking at as well as they replace those lines.
Right, so that one seems to me like that's, I mean, to me, would be essential because of the fact that it's part of an ongoing project, and also we are seeing some issues because of these water lines, and, I mean, that's a safety issue for sure with the fire department. I was over at Station 6, I believe, when one of the pipes burst and they had to shut down, so. And then the Campbell Avenue, I know I spoke to you about this, but I want to just reiterate the Campbell Avenue intersection and reconstruction. I mean, that is ultimately a safety issue as well, correct? With that improvement?
So, the why now on the
Right.
CIP page, well, I don't know what it is in the big book. In the small book, it's 47. But signals work in synchronization, and both are beyond their useful lifespan as they are over 40 years old. The roadway is concrete pavement that needs replacing due to deterioration and potholes.
Right.
Improvements to pedestrian crossing features will be added for safety.
So, again, another safety issue. I wouldn't want to push that off another year personally. And then my final question, regarding the one-time cash pay-as-you-go, anything that's recovered from that column, I know that the vice mayor had mentioned being able to like apply that towards potentially lowering taxes and probably some other areas, but from what I understand with PAYGO, you can't do that, correct? Because that would be an ongoing, anything with lowering taxes would be an ongoing expense versus a one-time expense, correct? So we could,
Yeah.
that can't be done, is that
This money has to be spent for one-time
one thing?
items.
Okay.
It can't be used for anything that's ongoing.
All right, okay. Yeah, and I thank you for kind of highlighting specifically what's in '24. I think that's my biggest concern is what we're spending right now. This year, we've been working on the '24 budget. That's, I think, what everybody's most concerned about. Anything beyond there, like you said, with the placeholders, it's good to see. With the school piece, if we took the money out of the the years beyond '24, the 73 million that's certainly currently earmarked, does that do anything with potentially hurting us with anybody coming in to try to give us additional funding or grants or anything like that like some of the other projects do?
No, because even if we could apply for some type of state program, I don't think it would be a problem now. Sometimes the state will earmark funds for school construction, not always. So, but I don't think that would harm our potential to receive those funds if we applied.
But, okay, so
And
really, I'm
it
sorry.
really is just a placeholder.
Right. So really, if we just focused on expenditures for '24 right now, anything that's beyond '24, we as a council, we can discuss that after we've approved this budget finally officially, from now until we discuss next year's budget and beyond, for any type of CIP concerns that we have. I mean, nothing, because those are, again, just projected projects and nothing is solidified yet. We can continue to have discussions. And even it sounds like what you said tonight regarding some of the projects, like the library, turning into the hotel, and even that, until that actually happens, those are still just discussions as well, even in the planning process
Correct.
and design process. So even that potential intersection or what that may look like, I know that Councilman Taylor and I talked about that briefly. Depending on what that might look like and what VDOT says, we don't even know if that's going to be a roundabout or not. So, okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Vice Mayor Farrell, did you want to speak?
Unless Ms. Dolan or Mr. Taylor wanted to say something
Did you
before
want to-
we repeat.
Yeah. Did you have anything you want to say before I?
No, the only thing I just want to say is that I supported the CIP plans from day one, and I will continue to support it. I find it pretty hard to believe that 12 months, when we push this stuff down the road, 12 months from now, that the cost is going to be less. I don't know I don't have a crystal ball that tells me that. And I can't believe that the amount of interest that you're going to earn on the money is enough to pay for the difference in the cost. And I think we've seen year after year what happens when we keep pushing things down the road. Ultimately, we have to face it, we have to do it. And I think it's almost like this is to kind of justify a 22-cent tax cut to get to where we are. So and Donna, we visited the other day, and you said that you threw out $168 million worth of requests for things to be done. I can't believe that after looking at what's here, I just think that you're looking at, most of what we're looking at is essential, and that has to be done for one reason or another, either safety or to build our economy or to keep our city looking great. Thank you.
Back to that downtown streetscapes thing. So just to be clear, the money that's being appropriated for the downtown streetscapes is separate from the water line replacements, correct?
Yeah, because the actual water line replacement
its own thing.
is in the water fund.
So it would be incorrect to say that the downtown streetscapes have anything to do with public safety or water pressure zones or so forth, because the real challenges in water pressure zones really aren't downtown. They're actually up kind of like by Fillmore Street, is that right, if I'm correct? Where they have to relay pump every time they have a fire, where they actually have to pump it from another street
And
relay pump and raise the
you
pressure.
would know
That's
more
where it's
than I
at. It's
do.
not, it's not downtown.
I was just gonna say, I don't fund them, but that's what I've heard is there's
That's-
pressure issues downtown.
There's volume and pressure issues up there, which is the real challenge. It's not as much as it is in other areas. It's not as much downtown. So I just want to be clear that the downtown streetscaping, like you said, is just beautification in conjunction with the necessary water line and sewer repairs and all of those things, correct?
It's not all beautification because we do have some pretty rough sidewalks that are uneven that we need to repair so people don't trip and sue the city for getting hurt when they trip in the sidewalk and those type of things.
What is the plan on the actual street surface with that streetscaping?
The next blocks, I could not tell you, but
Because my concern is that we're gonna be putting really expensive brick down in these roads at that price over the years. And I just don't think that's necessary. There's nothing wrong with asphalt. And they actually have plenty of street printed asphalt in Windhurst. It looks absolutely beautiful. And it's about a nickel on the dollar for putting brick and
Yeah,
cobblestone down.
I don't know.
I'm just making, just making that clear that there are other options out there than placing bricks in roads and cobblestone and things like that are actually much safer to walk on. I don't particularly wear high heels, but I've talked to plenty of people that do, and walking on cobblestone is not an easy task in high heels. So that is a tripping hazard as well. So that's just kind of a concern, when we talk about that. So when I look at the downtown streetscaping, are there maybe necessary sidewalk repairs here and there? Sure, absolutely. Are there some places where we probably have trees that need to be replaced? Absolutely, I'm sure, because the trees are probably damaging the sidewalks. But I don't see that as, what's the total number for this? 44.1 million for the total project cost?
Well, it's 6 million for the next phase.
And then when I look at it in the actual CIP, it says that there's gonna be, hold on.
Well, we still have most of Church Street to do, and I believe some projects still on Commerce and not sure about Jefferson. So I know we have lots of blocks left to do as we follow the water line replacement.
Right, so when I look at this, it says contributes to the generation of new revenue, okay? That's what it says in the department priority. Project contributes to the generation of new revenue. So we're looking at an actual, when you include the debt service, it's actually gonna be $56.4 million to the taxpayers for the downtown streetscaping over the course of the project. How long do you think it will take to generate $56.4 million in revenue off of downtown streetscaping?
A lot, a long time. We probably won't recoup that.
We'll never
But-
recoup it.
I can't imagine.
So,
But
so we're spending $56.4 million in the first sentence of the priority is to contribute to the generation of new revenue, but you just said it, we will never recoup that revenue.
But-
So we're actually just paying for a loss, is what we're doing, when we probably should be revisiting how we're doing some of this stuff. Granted, I get it. We've got to maintain downtown, we need to keep it beautiful, but some of the ways that we've been doing it, we need to do this on a Lynchburg budget, not an Arlington budget, okay? So if there's things that we have a very expensive taste for, right, but we just simply can't afford it, we need to start backing those things out and not doing them. We shouldn't be taking asphalt up and putting expensive brick in. It's too expensive. We cannot afford that on the taxpayer dollars. There's plenty of options. The way that they did Windhurst in the past is absolutely beautiful. They didn't use any brick pavers. They did street printing in the asphalt. They painted it. It's easy to maintain. It looks great. There's so many other options than what we're doing downtown right now that are so much less expensive and much more judicious with the taxpayer's dollar. That's kind of where I'm at with it. But
If it's okay. Wanted to highlight just something, and most of you know this, and I know that some of you are new to council, but you've lived here for a while. Part of this, and probably Kent White, and I'm not calling you out here, but, and this, I'm here almost 2 years now. I know that prior to me, many of your peers made a decision about an investment in downtown, and that there's a progressive way in which to invest that I think modeled together with the stakeholders downtown, that there were certain, and I'm going to use this word, promises about development and what it looked like as to why, because there was a point at which, and I know that this is a bit anecdotal, but there was a time that being downtown at 5 o'clock on Friday wasn't where you needed to be, and that people did what they could to get out of here as fast as possible. So there was a decision made at some point, probably maybe within Councilman Heggleson's tenure, I'm not sure, to invest in downtown. Now, to revisit how much and where and when and what have you, I just want us to be cognizant that there's been a progression, that there are expectations by certain businesses as to when that thing's coming for them. I know, for example, because you make an observation about asphalt as opposed to cobblestone. I know that the business across from Scene 3 was essentially aware, and I can't remember is it Innovative Wireless, and I know the CEO of that company. And when the investment, the aesthetic you talk about, stopped just this side of his business, he certainly made a point about it. So as we move forward, and again, we can look at investments and how much and where and what have you, and I get you about cobblestones and what have you, and how people walk on them. I know that we call it quality of life. I think it's character of a city. That maybe you and I, in thinking about walking on it, isn't exactly where we want to go. And you said something about, was it Arlington that you used?
Yes.
Arlington, as far as those tastes as opposed to the Lynchburg taste. I get you. Some of that, though, to compete with cities, I don't know that Arlington's our immediate competitor as far as where we are in dynamic, but those aesthetics are what create that downtown charm that have people visit it. And so when we contemplate what those things look like when we put back, absolutely we should take into consideration costs and what have you. Just want to make sure, and again, almost 2 years, so I don't have the full background on this, but there's annually, I know that we meet with businesses. We did recently, again, with a project manager to kind of outline those investments that are being made. And I know that small coffee shops and some of the boutiques that you see on Church and some of the things that are, I know that it was recently through Downtown Lynchburg Association, they did a Kickstarter campaign, and there are many businesses that had pretty cool stuff that I'm interested in attending. I think part of what interests them about here are the investments that are being made to create that aesthetic, that creates that charm, that creates that opportunity. So in thinking about whether or not we'll be able to substantially pay back what we invest, I can't say that we will, just like Donna. But I know that if you don't make those investments, which I think people have over time decided to make, I don't know that we get the same kind of interest. And so I think they kind of go hand in hand as far as how a city moves forward and how you kind of grow. Because I can't draw the radius and do it right here, right now. But I can't draw the radius and take the investment that you've made and see what change has happened or occurred as far as, I don't know, permits pulled and businesses that have relocated or those type things. I know that one thing that we champion quite a bit is CloudFit. That started up as an incubator up at the LRBA and then moved into our old, what is it called, building across the street? Right. And so part of that, I know that in talking to Carol Moon and others about the people that they attract or try to get to come to work for CloudFit, part of it is not just simply the building, but also the aesthetic of what's down here. I saw them just yesterday, and this is anecdote. I think they were all taking their summer photos for their jobs, and they were taking them in front of the building and on those steps. And so those are the things as characters that I think helps kind of attract people here to our city. And I hear you about investments, and it's Solomonic-like choices as to where those things happen in other areas and not necessarily.
I got it.
Yeah.
But you're talking about promises made and promises kept, right? But what about my 90-year-old neighbors that were promised sidewalks in 1976 when they were annexed from Campbell County, and they don't have it, right? So you can sit here and give me that argument all the time, but the reality is that I'm here for the citizens of this city, right? That's who I'm here for. And right now, they're in a squeeze financially, fiscally, right? And that's why we're having these conversations, because they're having a hard time paying for things. And the way the economy's going right now, and the way things are headed, it is not the time to do beautification projects or streetscaping improvements downtown. There has been an infinite amount of cash poured into downtown Lynchburg. Now, I would ask probably Donna this, because Donna probably knows this, she's been here many years, but where does the majority of our revenue come from for this city that funds this municipal corporation?
Real estate tax is number one.
Number one's real estate taxes.
Number two is personal property.
And if you were to slice that up by zip code, does it come from 24505 or does it come from the rest of the city?
Well, now that we have more than 1,000 residents downtown, we're getting more from downtown than we have in the past. But obviously, most of our residential is around downtown.
Right, so everybody else but downtown is subsidizing all of this stuff downtown. So the people that actually provide the revenue to fund this municipal corporation are the ones that are subsidizing what's going on in downtown. And you know what's happening? For my neighbors, is they're actually getting priced out of being able to afford downtown. I know there's some people up here that have no problem being able to go and pay for a night out downtown. But that's not the case for everybody, right? And that's not the case for the vast majority of the city. And I'm getting sick and tired of taking the money from working class, middle class families in this city just to continue pouring it into Boonesboro's playground. Right? The majority of the money that funds this municipal corporation come from hard-working, blue-collar taxpayers. That's a fact. It doesn't come from downtown. Yet, we're looking at a $56.5 million investment that we will never return that money back to this city on. Maybe we will 20, 30 years down the road, 40, right? We got to scale back on this stuff. I'm not here just to represent downtown. I'm here to represent the entire city. And that's just how I feel about that. Now, going back to some other things, I just got to point out, kind of blown away, and I hope the residents of Ward 2 are watching, that Dr. Wilder said we got to trust the procurement process and trust the city staff when we just heard tonight that there was an issue within the last year involving a city staff member getting kickbacks potentially from a contractor that was bidding on projects, right? So,
I don't know all the circumstances. Again, remember, personnel matter.
agreed.
That person separated themselves from their employee. We asked the police department to review, took it to the Commonwealth's attorney, and there was then, at that time, nothing to prosecute.
Well,
So if there's new evidence, so again,
I will say this, that we have every reason to have oversight over what's going on with the way the taxpayers' dollars are being spent. Every reason. That's all I have to say.
We need to keep this moving, so I would submit that I want to target the pay-as-you-go. I want to reduce that. I was going to ask city staff to articulate back to me either now or in the future if the pay-go was reduced to 6.8 and some change, I have the number here, what would that impact with what y'all are trying to do? And then I understand what the mayor was asking with respect to, well, if it's one-time money, you gotta pay it and you can't use it for tax. There's multiple ways to do this. If we were to use those funds and within that reduction, eliminate the utility tax in the city, which is the electricity tax and the gas tax, that's 4.1. That results in the 6.8 that is left in the pay-as-you-go. Is that feasible?
No.
If you don't have any, why not?
Because your utility taxes are ongoing revenues.
I
This
know,
is
I'm trying to get rid
one-time
of it.
money.
I know, I'm
But you
trying.
can't use this money to replace that. You could do it for 1 year, but you can't do it as ongoing because that's ongoing revenue.
Okay, I'd like to consider that. If I can do it for the 1 year, I'd like to consider that. That's all I'm asking.
Okay.
That's,
I'm-
that's all I'm asking. We don't
Okay,
have to solve it now
okay.
if we have to figure it
I-
out later. And then, to that end, I would submit to my colleagues, there are others here who need to speak and talk to items. I want to get them out of here as they're able. So if everyone's okay with it, I'd like to put a pin in this and let's get to the bibs, and then if we have to come back to this, we can. But for my purposes with the CIP, that's my focus is, yes, there's other things with ongoing expenditures and debt and other projects that I have very large questions about, but my focus is on the one-time funds that we're looking to do. And I'm kind of tickled because we just had a really a fierce argument for the taxpayer from Councilmember Missions in that, yet 3-4 months ago, he was calling me a rhino, passing notes, when he voted for the stinking thing just a few weeks ago. So let's call balls and strike, folks. Let's focus on this, not just put big arguments out there how I stand for, the whole city when you represent Boonesboro. I struggle with this because I also represent 2, 4, 5, or 3, and I know my residents who I represent would be a little bit miffed at the comment you just made. I live downtown. I support it. I'm getting on my high horse. I don't need to. That's my goal, is to reduce the one-time expenditures, see what it looks like, what's possible with it. If we have to go over the debt financing with it moving forward, great, we can do that too. I would submit we should move on to the bib items and let those who are here to speak be able to.
Did Larry,
Hold on one second. Larry, hold on. Councilman Taylor, do you have anything to say?
We've been at this thing, what,
An hour?
7 months,
Yeah.
6 months? We need to bring it to pass, okay? We need to reason with one another. And our city staff, and get this thing done. So I'm for passing the budget. Let's get it done. Let's get it done, and we got other years to work other things out. Let's take care of our people, and we'll take care of our people. Let's get it done.
Just a couple things to add on top of this. Our city manager had said about promises for downtown. All those people have left. You understand that? And we used to have Shules. We used to have Farmers Feed and Seed. We used to have First Colony. That's now switched to Pacific Life, which is now, who knows what's happening, which is now building after building. All the banks, SunTrust Bank, that was Truist, now gone. Allied Arts, selling it and turning it into condos. You're looking at Central Fidelity Bank that has changed numerous times. So when we say that these things have been promises, recognize that it's been lots of turnover. So we can't use some false premise. But what we can do is say, hey, let's actually do what's critical. So when we're looking at removing and changing the water downtown, there's $3 million in the capital improvement plan for water downtown, but there's $6 million improving the streets and sidewalks. I think that is something that we could easily do by taking that $6 million for 2024, moving it to $1 million or $2 million, no more than the $3 million, because it shouldn't cost the same amount of money to take out, dig out, change the water lines, replace all that for safety as it does to throw the dirt back in, re-asphalt it, and put in the sidewalks. So there's no way it should be double. In this budget, we have 2024, $3.1 million for water lines downtown. We have $6 million for streetscape improvements. Those are as an easy fix to either have it no more than double. So, no more than the $3 million for the water and $3 million for the streetscape. Cutting the $6 million down to $3 million. I think it really should be $1 million or $2 million. If we go just with these pay-as-you-go, I think what we're missing is the point of what Donna has really stressed, is the fact that there's some of these things with pay-go are actually improvements. They're maintenance, like the $5.6 million of fixing roofs, and that's under pay-go. But if we just take that line out, we're missing the yellow lines. I think we need to focus on the yellow lines that are essential or nice later, plus adding back, we could add back $3 million onto that line by taking that $3 million streetscape downtown from $6 million, taking it down to either $2 million, I think should be plenty, quite frankly, but $3 million if needed. I think that Campbell Avenue intersection and signal is still a $3 million that can be pushed off a year. These parks now, that's a different story. Parks are actually really saying, hey, we're gonna take where there hasn't been a park in a neighborhood and actually invest in that. That makes sense. That can make sense. And I just because they're either pay-as-you-go or bond-funded, I don't think it should be just thrown out because they're pay-as-you-go or thrown out just because they're bond funded. I think those should be legitimate concerns that people say, we haven't had a park in this neighborhood. Maybe that is a time that we actually put a park here. So I don't think, or make some improvements to the Heritage Park, or actually build a new park at College Park. I don't think those are mutually exclusive. But I do think what is mutually exclusive is making sure that we slide those projects that are not necessary or not necessary now, slide that over an entire year. And maybe we can discuss later the College Park improvements. I know the Vice Mayor has pushed for that. That's important to him. I think that is something that we can talk about. I think you can actually allocate that money by removing that, taking $6 million from the streetscapes downtown, bring that down to $2 million. And you got an extra $4 million where you could do the $600,000 for the plant or the park, the College Park, $200,000 for Heritage. We again push off the College Avenue or the Campbell Avenue interchange a year. I think we're golden, and we can approve this then next meeting with those kind of changes. Some of these other things in the pay-as-you-go, I think maybe Donna, you can address it, but just because they're under pay-as-you-go, you did the pay-as-you-go because you didn't want to bond fund them, because they're not, they have long-term benefit, but they're more maintenance, which is typically an annual thing. You may only put one roof every 20 years on one building, but you're counting that still as
If it's a full roof replacement, it could be eligible for bond funds. If it's repairs to a roof, I don't recommend bond funding that.
Yeah, to the repairs. Okay. I think that would be an easy way forward, and we could approve this then next meeting, or, but I think there's still lots of things that we discussed or need discussion.
All right, well, thank you very much for your time and your patience, Donna. You are,
One last quick thing, if I could. I mean, I know Councilmember Wilder asked about Florida Avenue. That was one on here. I think Florida Avenue that you had mentioned, that has drastically changed
There's no additional funding for '24.
for this year, but did it drastically change from what was proposed before?
They're still working on some possibilities for Florida Avenue. It has gone up in cost based on what would happen with the railroad trestle, but there's other options they're looking at, and that's why there is no additional appropriation in '24.
Thank you.
Not bad.
again, thank you for your time and your patience, Donna. You get an extra gold star tonight.
Thank you. I'm supposed to, is there going to be a vote at the next meeting? Because if there is, I need to put numbers in a resolution.
So right now, what we have styled is for this afternoon, we were sent two options. City attorney put those together, whether or not you voted as is, and/or then changes. What I heard Councilman Hagelson say was something about putting it out to, the next meeting would be June 23rd? 7th. So, a couple days shy of the fiscal year. So, it's kind of.
Madam Mayor, in order to help us move along, I would motion, I'm going to motion that council move forward as planned with the agenda this evening.
So she needs to so leave it on the on the 7:30 meeting.
Leave it on the 7:30 meeting.
Okay.
That's a motion.
So, do I have a second?
Well, I mean, the agenda's already on there, so what you're saying is
Okay.
that.
Or it doesn't have to be a motion. I'm just saying, like, leave it as
Leave it as
is, and then.
Come back with something with
But
blanks,
the
I guess.
resolutions have numbers to them. And so those
Right.
numbers, we can change those numbers, right? Is that what you're saying?
I'm trying to balance the fact that there have been some who've said they don't like it, some who've said they don't, and also at the same time that at least one council member is, I'm assuming, has requested the opportunity to vote on it. So I'm trying to balance all that, that's all.
So we'll leave the agenda as is, and we'll discuss it again at 7:30, I guess, at that meeting then.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
But they'll be prepared to change those numbers, right? Because we're voting on, the resolution has numbers to it. So the numbers for the resolution need to be changed on some facet before we vote on those.
They're currently blank.
Oh, gotcha.
They're blank, there's no numbers in there, so it's blank, so you have option A. is as is, and then option B is we'll fill in the blank.
So $3.28 versus 520 million, we can do that. Good, like it.
All right, moving on to our business item briefings. We will now look at item number 3, Dunbar Middle School Heating Renovations Public-Private Education Act proposal. This item will appear before council for action on June 27th, 2023. Dr. Reed Wodica. Hello.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to see all of you. So I'm here tonight to discuss the Dunbar Middle School PPEA project for the heating project, or the heating system in the building. So we're here tonight just to kind of go over that and then request your authorization to negotiate a comprehensive agreement. To remind you, the PPEA stands for Public-Private Education Facilities and Infrastructure Act. And
Since this is a business item briefing, we're going to be briefed on it right now for the next, minute, and then vote on it some other point in the future?
June 22nd.
Okay.
Okay, so a couple things tonight. So Lynchburg City Schools received an unsolicited proposal for a PPEA to replace the heating system at Dunbar Middle School that came from Southern Air. This was a planned replacement, but this relates to the way we're procuring the project. I know that you all have engaged in a PPEA related to the police department before. I understand you were briefed on the process before, so I won't go through all of that process with you. But this is just a little bit different in the way that we procure these projects. This project will be funded with COVID relief. It is replacing as a result of one boiler being operational in the building, as well as the steam system being very antiquated and near failure throughout the building. So it's time to replace the heating system. We want to use the COVID relief funds to replace the HVAC system in the building. No city funds are requested for the project. The project will be between $2.8 and $3.5 million, depending on the options that we negotiate in the terms of the agreement. And then the city council is required by the state code and the school board policy to ultimately approve the comprehensive agreement. What you're asking for tonight is just authorization to enter in negotiations with Southern Air. This is not approving the agreement. This is not approving the project. But that will ultimately come back to you likely in August. And so school board policy, R22, authorizes the use of PPEA. And I will say that that has been on the books since 2002, but has never been used by LCS. And I think the first PPEA in Lynchburg was the police department. So this is we haven't done it a lot, but it's been well used throughout Virginia. Just a couple components of the project. As I said before, this is related to the elimination of the existing steam heating system, and we replace it with a more efficient hot water heating system that's more modern in the way that we heat buildings. Largely, this is boiler replacement as well as a number of pipes in the building. This project makes sense to use PPEA because it is a complex project. Dunbar is a complex building. In fact, it's 3 different buildings. And so one of the really great values of using the PPA process is that we can be at the table with the designer and the construction company, which is actually the same group in this case. But it allows us, when there are challenges, likely challenges that we'll find when we get into construction, we'll be able to be at the table without a significant number of change orders. So this provides an opportunity to have a set price for the project, and there is some risk in terms of the offerer or the proposer, right, which is why we use PPEA. They think that their number is right, but we're not. The way we write the contract is that we will have as few change orders as we possibly can as well. So I wanted to share just a picture of the existing boiler, not in great shape, and certainly is not. This is the one that's not functional, and so I am very concerned that if we don't make investments here, we will end up with a building that doesn't have any heat. Mr. Missions, I think you. I'm sorry, you're pointing at me, so I didn't know if it was a question or not. Just a process going forward. So the school board voted to accept but not award the proposal. That's just the way the process works. You vote to say, we're going to consider this. We're going to solicit additional proposals as well. After a 45-day advertisement, we did not receive any additional proposals. And then last week, the school board authorized the school administration to begin the comprehensive agreement. What we wanted to do is to come to you to get your feedback and make sure that the city council was sort of on board with this project before we started negotiations, because if there was a challenge there, we didn't want to go through that process and not have our communication and transparency about what we're doing. So ultimately, the the city council must ultimately approve the comprehensive agreement before it can be ratified. Just a couple things on process, just some previous dates as well. So ultimately, this summer, we'll be negotiating that agreement if that comes to your approval, as well as ultimately, we'll bring that back to you in August 2023 to approve the document if you so choose, and then that will allow us to be in construction in the fall, lasts about a year, and then ultimately, we need to have this fund spent by December of 2024. So we have a little bit of a compressed timeframe, so we wanted to make sure that we're continuing to move this along and make sure that we're investing in the buildings and using those COVID relief funds as they were intended in this case. So ultimately, what we request is that Lynchburg City Schools consider authorizing the school division to enter into negotiations with Southern Air that will result in a comprehensive agreement. What we're doing tonight is not approval of an agreement, but just simply an authorization for us to begin negotiations. And as I said before, time is critical on this. So be happy to take any questions you might have.
Very much. Council missions?
I think this is great. It's a very creative way to get this done. It's a great use of the COVID relief funds. I know that there's tons of them out there to be spent right now by the school division, right? There's a lot of history with that school. I think it's very important that we do what we can to make sure that school remains in service. I think it's important. So I just wanted to kind of say well done, and you know, we need to make sure that we're taking care of the kids in our schools and serving them appropriately, and part of that is by having safe buildings that are climate controlled, I believe. So
Councilman Henderson? Did you want to speak? No? Oh, anyone else? No? Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right. Well, you stay up here, actually, because you're up next, too. Okay. Request to amend Lynchburg City Schools major classification funding for fiscal year '24. This will appear for a vote tonight under general business. Dr. Modica.
Thank you again. So the purpose of our request tonight is to request that some of the funds that were appropriated into the administration category and the technology category be recategorized into instruction. As you know, this is our first year doing categorical funding, and so we need to have this relationship, and so have some grace on where we are. So we wanted to make sure that we are getting the funds in the right place for where we need them. We are asking to move $705,385 from administration to $629,471 from technology to instruction. There's a couple of reasons for this. First of all, we've heard City Council and your concerns about making sure that we are investing in instruction appropriately. That is what this does. I think there's also been a fair amount of confusion about what is in the admin budget, and some of that has to do with where certain positions are funded. So you saw in your comments back from the superintendent this evening, or earlier today, just some of those positions that might be moving from there. So these are positions like the board certified behavioral analyst, other sort of very direct student serving positions. And so our intent is that when you see the administration budget moving forward, it'll simply be superintendent's office, finance, HR, communications, those types of sort of corporate functions that really speak to sort of management of the overall organization. So there is a really clear understanding of what is instruction as far as the direct service improvements. So we do have some of those funds available in administration because we, first of all, we cut a number of positions. So we have actually reduced 6 positions. We've eliminated 3 positions and not filled another 3 positions. We've also have a number of other employees who are sort of taking up other additional responsibilities. And so that is sort of how we are funding that and making sure that the administration budget is addressing the needs that we have. So we have reduced some positions in administration. We have eliminated some vacant ones. Also, actual people are no longer working either for the school division or we've reassigned them elsewhere. So that is happening. There was a second question about the annual school report in the requests, and that is, I want to just kind of clarify what that is and make sure that everybody knows because I had to learn that. So the annual school report is simply an estimate at this point of how many people we had working in each kind of function. So one of the things that I did not understand when I worked for the city was that there is a very complex, very prescribed way that the VDOE says you are to classify different positions and different employees, and it's this whole chart of accounts that I have learned all about, and there's just a lot to it, and you'll see those sort of codes that are there. So where we are right now is we have unaudited numbers for the fiscal year that's about to end. That process gets completed in September. And so you see on that document an approximate amount of where we are. A couple things we'll point out. You'll see some additions are some additional positions in 23 versus 22 in your document. One, for instance, is the 10 additional teachers. We didn't have 10 new positions. What that shows is that we have 10 less vacancies than we did before, so it talks about actual positions. So that's a good thing. It's a positive thing. But that, again, those are unaudited numbers and kind of see where we are as well. So to that point, I want to point out that the school year 21-22 is when that sort of great resignation occurred, when we had lots of people leaving. And particularly, we came back to school full-time mid-year, lots of folks left. We had a little bit of that this year, but not nearly as much. And so we've been able to fill and keep some positions in a little bit better the way that we have in previous years. And so that might be some kind of the distinctions that you might see if you're looking at those numbers. So that's the request. Certainly would take any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. Councilman Missions?
The first question that I had, what was the amount, I don't have that up in front of me, that's being moved from administration to instruction?
705,385 from administration and 629,471 from technology.
So the question that I have is what's the cost of those 36 and a half positions that are being moved from administration to instruction?
Yeah,
Because when I do the math here, that comes down to 19.3 thousand per position, and I know it's not like that because I'm sure that the student services director is a six-figure job, right?
Sure.
So, I guess
So
that's
it's
the
not
question.
so it's not one for one, right? So there's,
Yeah.
So there was some money left that's available in instruction that would be available to kind of cover some of that, as well as what those costs are, in addition to the costs that are associated with pay increases that we're trying to do. So I don't know that you can do like one per one. I can get you the total amount. I don't have that in front of me.
And that's what I'm curious about is, and I understand, I think the attendance clerks, absolutely, hands down, they need to be moved over into instruction. Is that allowed by VDOE?
Yes.
Okay. Because I know that it's administration, attendance, and health, right? And
So-
you talked about the classification.
Yeah, it's a great point to ask the same question. So when we talk about the attendance component that's connected to administration, it's kind of talking about the folks that work downtown that are truancy and those folks that deal with
Okay.
that. So that's really what we're kind of talking about.
Okay, so what you're saying is there's actually a little bit of money left over in instruction to absorb the
Yeah,
difference here.
let me give you more, let me get you facts on that and make sure we
Okay.
get the number right. Yeah.
And then the other question that I have is, reading the news in advance the other day, you guys are applying, I think, was it 4 million in COVID funds? Where's that going?
Okay, so that is so it goes mostly to instruction,
Okay,
which is a significant concern for the next year.
Okay.
So I'll just say that. So it mostly is going to instruction. I'll get a full breakdown.
okay.
Yep.
And then the positions in technology, what was that, like 630,000, I think, something like that?
Yes, so we're removing $629,000 from there. So we did not actually cut positions there. This is just moving money around to be more reflective of where we're actually spending.
So you were a little fat in instruction? I mean, I'm just trying to
I wouldn't use that
grasp.
term.
Okay.
I
So-
think it's.
Or not instruction, I
we're-
mean,
yeah.
technology, so what,
Yeah.
so, I'm just trying to understand, that's
So
all.
really going back and taking a look at where we sort of ended up during the year, really kind of, I wouldn't say that. I would just say that we are making sure that our expenditures are reflecting actual experiences.
Okay.
Experience, so.
Okay, all right, that answers my question.
Helgeson?
With that, so, I mean, that is a good point. If you're moving, 30 people from administration to instruction, but those people that you've moved are a fraction of their dollar salary, that means it's taken the instruction money to subsidize the people that were moved from administration to instruction. Because now there's less money to go to the raises for those that were in instruction.
Sure. So I think, again, we got to look at dollars and facts, right? So it's sort of easy to say that. But what can you actually do with those amounts of funds? So let me give you the actual numbers so I can calculate. I just don't have it in front of you.
Gotcha.
So I think just before we sort of start down that road.
Yep, gotcha, thank you.
Well, I mean,
I-
to have those numbers before we vote on it would be,
The 27th, I thought you
So,
said.
that's another-
requires two votes, so it'd be tonight and then the 27th. So,
okay.
Middle school, on the 27th. Yeah, Mr. Marks for tonight. Or supposed to be in there. Any other questions?
Okay.
Thank you very much, appreciate it. Okay, moving on. Sale of city-owned property on Early Street, Miss Margette Upshur.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of council. This is a business item briefing on the sale of city-owned property on Early Street. This item is going to come to council on June 27th with a public hearing and the recommendation to authorize the city manager to sell .07 acre lot to ANCH LLC. So let me move this. There we go. In July of 2022, and I just want to once again say thank you for the patience of John Fees. I was contacted by Mr. Fees of ANCH LLC with an inquiry on city-owned property. It's actually a small piece of 410 Birch Street, which is part of the Fire Station 4. Mr. Fees had purchased 2207 Early Street, and then he's also purchased 2204 Bedford Avenue for redevelopment. He asked if we would consider selling that small back portion of the parcel. I contacted the fire chief, and we met with station personnel, and the chief gave his blessing to move forward. A survey was performed on the parcel, and so it is .07 or 3,049 square feet. And if it were sold to ANCH LLC, the parcel would be added to his 2207 Early Street. So we followed the city's property sale process, which is to list the property, put a sign up, listed the property in MLS. That has been since February of 2023. The city received several offers with ANCH LLC being the highest offer. This was brought to you in closed session on April the 11th, 2023. And just as an aside, I just want to publicly acknowledge that Mr. Fees has invested over $6 million to redevelop 2204 Bedford Avenue. If you have not been there, it is absolutely remarkable. He and his wonderful family have turned the formerly blighted property into a food campus. It's 18,000 square feet, which includes the Rivermont Refillery, the Trust Restaurant, the Flower District Bakery, a community kitchen, and Scratch Pasta headquarters, which we are so delighted to have here in Lynchburg. And it's their retail and production. The proceeds from this sale will go back to the fire department. And Mr. Fees has been in the audience for quite some time if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Dr. Weiler?
Yeah, I'm just excited about the investment in our community. I grew up right on Ash Street, right behind the fire department. And I'm just so glad for the investment to see that community come to life and be, just used to be horrible, that like the wooded area where the old Coca-Cola plant was back in the day. So I'm just glad to see the whole Bedford Avenue transformed and the investment being made in our community. Thank you.
And this is, I'm never good at turning the, moving the needle, but I put a big red circle around the tiny little parcel that is carved out. It's a natural tree line there at Station 4, if you've been there. So it's a tiny little parcel that's right beside his other property.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the 2023 bond anticipation note. This item will appear before council for action on June 27th, 2023. Ms. Donna Witt.
Thank you. Yes, so staff went to the bond market in March of 2023. We closed on our general obligation bond issue to permanently finance our 2020 ban. So it is time to set up the new bond anticipation notes for whatever projects you approve. So right now, the band will fund current and future projects. There's $35.9 million for cities, $5.6 million for school. Water's 13 million, sewer 9 million, stormwater 3 million, and airport 1.5, based on the current capital projects plan. So we'll receive responses to the RFP that has gone out to establish this new line of credit. We'll receive those on Friday. And so on the 27th, we will be bringing back to you, I'll work with our financial advisors, what we are recommending. And just understand, it's not set in stone. So the numbers can be reduced, they can be increased based on the RFP responses. So I'll have more information for you based on your all's vote, and then also based on the RFPs that we do receive on the 15th. So more information to come.
Okay, great. Any questions, comments? No? All right, thank you. And I know you're staying up here for the next thing.
Yes.
The Lynchburg Adult Drug Court opioid abatement funding proposal. This item will appear before council for action on June 27th.
Yes, and this is to actually amend the 24 city, federal, state aid budget and appropriate $964,424 from the National Opioid Settlement Funds. And the way we propose to spend this is to expand the work of the Lynchburg Adult Drug Court. So we'll receive these funds over a 15-year period. There is more strings than Pinocchio. I've worked with city staff to try to figure out the most efficient and effective ways to spend this money. Worked with our police chief and our fire chief, of which both of them said with all the strings, there's no way for them to utilize these funds. But the drug court has come forward, Judge Watson and Taylor, God, I lost her name. Jones, thank you. She's here. So, I'm sorry. The drug court's pretty amazing. So if you're not familiar with the drug court, maybe we need to have them come back and really kind of tell you about what they do, because it's pretty amazing. And this would actually expand the drug court. And the program that they have put forward expands that program with training, drug testing, social activities, recovery housing, transportation, and a graduation program. And everything that they have proposed checks the box for all the strings of this opioid abatement money. So we are recommending that over the course of the years through grants that we provide this money as it comes into the city to the drug court to expand their program.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Any questions or comments? All right, thank you very much. All right, we now will move on to the added item, the discussion for school board appointments. Council Missions, did you want to?
Yes, I just think that it would be judicious for us to actually have a procedure to get to the point where we appoint these candidates, so we're not doing this haphazardly. I provided everybody with a draft copy. I know that our city attorney has made some notes on that, a couple notes already, which I would love for him to provide to us. But the whole point of this is to, one, make sure we're doing this in kind of an expeditious manner, that we're keeping in spirit of our rules of procedure, so that we're conducting the business of the city efficiently, and that after the interviews, that we have a way to consider the nominees in a fashion where we're actually not, what I want to avoid is a situation where we're criticizing these candidates, where rather we create a situation where we are trying to advocate for the ones that we believe, as you know, individuals, the seven of us, should be the school board members who are appointed, so we can eliminate any criticism where we're always trying to advocate for them, and using a system that we've used in the past with the budget process, with the list. I'm sure you're probably very familiar with that, Donna, where things were put on a list, and then it would take a majority to bring them off the list with the candidates. And then finally, going down to the end of it, if we have any contested candidates in any of the districts, that we would just use the same voting procedures that we use in our organizational meeting. So that's kind of what this says, but I will hand it off to the parliamentarian to kind of get his thoughts if he's got anything to add or say about this.
Hold on one second, the Vice Mayor would like to say something, please.
I think the simplest way is just to have someone motion for who they want to support, and then have it seconded and have debate. If the vote fails, you move to the next person, next nomination, and next person, you just keep going until it's finished. I think it's more complicated to, I appreciate what this attempts to do. I think it makes it more complicated than what it needs to be. You know, if Larry and Chris motion for Stephanie, and Stephanie for some reason fails, well then Sterling and Mary Jane can motion for whoever. And then if that fails, you keep going until you cross the name off. And I just assumed you wouldn't motion for any of us to be on the school board. I don't know. But I mean that in jest. All that to say is, like, I think that's the easiest thing to do.
I guess maybe the only difference is there's like 17, 18 candidates. And so we're going to have, so we need to kind of narrow it down. I think this is just simply a way to narrow down to where you got two. You know, no more than two in each district.
You can narrow it down by voting.
I mean, you're going to vote on 17 different people. I mean, because somebody's asked for these people to be interviewed, so, I mean, there may be a vote on each of them. So if you narrow it down, I think this is just trying to expeditiously narrow down to two, unless we can figure out a way to narrow down to two. Well, yeah, that's what this is. Who do you want to stay on the list or off the list? You know, if there's not a majority that says, hey, we want, anyway. So you're narrowing it down quicker rather than one at a time each person, and having 17 separate votes or 15 separate votes or 12 separate votes.
To be fair, for the interest of time, I mean, I believe this email was sent out at 3 o'clock. I didn't have a chance to look at it until like 3:45. I think some people just got it tonight when they got here. I think it'd be good for us to look at, maybe we email back and forth with some discussion and move on with the agenda.
And I'm totally okay with that. It was more or less, I would like to have this nailed down before we start the first interview.
I think it's
That's
fair
really what it
to have that
comes down to,
discussion
so we
and
have
nail
a-
something down prior to next week for sure. So, but thank you for putting this together. I appreciate that.
But I do like your idea about not criticizing. I think that adds a level of civility that we don't see up here too often.
I
Thank
do
you very
like-
much
I
for
do
that.
And she critically said that.
That's right, I did.
See, you should have said, you were so nice the way you said it, then you had to give him a backhanded slap.
I would,
That wasn't a slap,
I
that
know,
was
I
not
know.
a slap.
I know.
I would
I've been slapped by you, I know. No, just kidding.
I would offer though that just while we're here right now, I know that Matt's made some notes. I would just like to kind of get his input if everybody's okay with that.
Yeah, great.
On what he had.
Well, and I've just seen it, just this evening while we were up here, but I guess what I would suggest, if this is a route that city council wants to go, it should probably be made part of the city council's rules and procedures. And the reason I say that is there still needs to be a process where the presiding officer is overseeing the enforcement of the policy that's adopted by city council. Just preliminarily, and please don't hold me to this, like I said, this, it's, sure, it's up to you all.
Time to go, email us.
Yeah, Mr. Friedman, thank you. I would like that comment in writing. That would be good as a response to this, and then we'll.
Sure,
we can
be
get that.
happy to.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'll get back to Dr. Wilder for his roll call comments if he has any. Councilwoman Dolan, do you have any?
No items.
Okay, Councilman Mischins?
Just some great stuff going on in the community this week. I know a couple things that I've seen a lot of the kids really enjoying is Vacation Bible School, Thomas Road, started last night. Huge, tons of kids there. They're having a blast. Really just thankful to that ministry for putting that together for our young kids in our city. And then also something that's new to my family, and we're participating in the first time, is the pedal program with Lynchburg City Schools. I've got a first grader in there, and they started today. It was pretty exciting to get that opportunity for enrichment for kids. And I've also learned that there's some other programs that started today as well, that there's actually kind of like 3 different tracks for the different students throughout the summer to get enrichment, to get caught up or to get ahead, kind of a thing. So that's something great that's happening that started today, and I'm just thankful for that and excited to see those things move forward and see what they do for the youth in our city to try to get them on grade level.
That's great. Council Taylor? I'm good. No? Ms. Mayor Peralta?
Go Hornets! Just want to say that's awesome. That is absolutely awesome. Yeah, that deserves a round of applause. I mean,
I'll allow clapping for this one time.
I was tracking that, and golly, that's, I mean, just wow. I mean, that is awesome. Brings notoriety to the city, to the university, and I heard a fun story. I'll share it briefly. I know we're all hungry. 114 years ago, I can't take credit for finding out the story. I heard it on the radio. 114 years ago, a group of men went to the school and said, we want to have a baseball program. And I think it was the president at the time went to the students and said, great, see that batch of trees right there? Go chop them all down and sell them, and then that's your down payment for your uniforms, your bats, and other necessities to run a program. And that's how the program started 114 years ago, was, all right, go make the money. So all to say, congratulations to the University of Lynchburg. Go Hornets.
Awesome. Yes, thank you. Dr. Wilder?
Again, just want to thank Dr. Coleman was here. I'm sorry he left. Just commend him for his final term on the school board, for his years of service. I know they recognized him on Tuesday. I was out of town for that day. But I want to commend Dr. Coleman. Please relate to him his service of 9 years for our school board and the work he's done for our community. He has such a passion for our children. I want to really commend him for that. And also to the Downtown Business Association, they had an amazing event about 2 weeks ago where they recognized, kind of like a Shark Tank, where they recognized certain businesses and startup businesses and gave us some startup capital for those projects. And it's just such amazing to see how well we work together in our community to make sure our businesses are thriving, to look at some of those empty abandoned buildings and try to fill those up. So I want to really commend them for that creative idea. I mean, it was such an amazing, amazing event. Some great projects they have coming to our city. So I'm excited about that. Again, it just helps the quality of life in our community. Thank you. And thank you to the staff again for all the work on the budget and all the emails. My God, Jesus, help us, Lord. All those emails y'all get, oh my goodness, bless your hearts. I can delete them, but I got to read every last one of them. So I commend you for all the hard work you're doing. Thank you so much.
One more brief one. We did have a few graduations, and just want to say congratulations to all of our graduates. Now, I was going to say rising graduates, but no, they've graduated. So to all of our men and women who've now joined the workforce, I hope. Congratulations to our class of 2023.
That's right, yes. I agree. And in my mayor's remarks, I'm going to continue to highlight the different offices and departments in our wonderful city. And tonight I will be highlighting the Office of Economic Development and Tourism. The city manager proposed acknowledging them in alphabetical order, so here we are. This department works to position the city of Lynchburg for investment by businesses, residents, talent, and visitors as the lead economic development and destination marketing organization for the city. Staff develops a comprehensive strategy to promote the city to current and potential employers and anchor institutions through business visitation, site selection, workforce development, and marketing, including the OpportunityLynchburg.com website and newsletter. Did you know that this department manages 2 industrial parks, Ivy Creek Innovation Center and Lynchburg Center for Industry? They also promote and administer planning for property development, as well as state and local business incentives to support business attraction and expansion. In addition, this department staffs the Economic Development Authority, which develops industrial parks and buildings within the city and is responsible for Lynchburg's economic development incentive programs. As the city's destination marketing organization, the department drives growth and sustainability by supporting asset development and marketing the city and region as a preferred destination for meetings and conferences, sporting events, group tour travel, talent attraction, and leisure visitors. through strategic partnerships, coordination with Virginia Tourism Corporation, direct sales coordination, digital marketing strategy, including the LY8 Loves You campaign, and lynchburgvirginia.org website, media relations and advertising, staff supports the delivery of excellent Lynchburg experiences to drive spending in our local businesses. The department also manages the Lynchburg Museum and Visitor Services and serves as the point of contact for special events in the city. That sounds like a commercial. That's really, really great. I'm not promoting myself. I'm just saying that the text does. So thank you to our Economic Development Office. And as the mayor, I just want to say how proud I am of our city. And I love when we get to celebrate as a team for one of our teams, which the Hornets, we were so excited to see everybody all over the city celebrating University of Lynchburg and what the baseball team did. So that was awesome. With that said, we are now recessed until 7:30.